today we have a very influential personality from the cruise industry. He is the Vice President of Global Cruise and Super Yacht Sector with Inchcape. Also, he is known as the Bionic Man. He will explain the story of why is he called a Bionic Man. He handles and oversees over 10,000 cruise ship calls across the world, which is like tremendous. I don't know how he does it, but he will explain.
That's why I love the job, because shipping is a critical function of life, because everything in this room was shipped here, you know.
True. You work with multiple cruise brands. What differentiates a successful cruise company with an average one?
The world is residential, and there's one residential line where they're building the first ever purpose-built residential cruise ship, and that's called Storylines.
Storylines. I love
that
the name.
project.
Man. You're also the VP of Super Yachts. So what do you mean by Super Yachts and more luxurious than the cruise ships, right?
Yes and no. I mean,
which is the largest or let's say biggest super yacht hub of the world?
Well, it's in.
With inflation rising, how are the cruise companies optimizing operations to stay profitable?
The big goal of all cruise lines is to improve operational efficiency and to focus on cost reduction.
Money is water and water is money. So I've heard a lot about this quote from you. Why don't you tell our audience? Okay guys, welcome to Port podcast once again, and this is your gateway to the shipping, sailing, cruising and the maritime world. I'm Captain Rajat, a seasoned marine pilot. Each week I sit down with industry experts, trade pioneers, startup founders and the sailors who have made the difference to the maritime community. Whether you are a maritime professional or just curious to know about the forces behind sailing, shipping and cruising, this is your podcast. So guys, today we have a very influential personality from the cruise industry. Let me just give you a brief introduction of who he is. So he's a prominent figure from the global cruise industry. He is the Vice President of Global Cruise and Super Yacht Sector with Inchcape Shipping. Also, he is known as the Bionic Man. He will explain the story of why is he called a Bionic Man. He handles and oversees over 10,000 cruise ship calls across the world, which is like tremendous. I don't know how he does it, but he will explain. He also provides consultancy, shore excursions, ground handling and crew logistics, including bunkering. I present to you Mr. Grant Holmes. Welcome to the podcast, Mr. Holmes. And thank you so much for joining.
Thank you.
So, you do so many things. How does that work, and how did you manage to articulate your routine in such a way that you can do so many things?
Well, first and foremost, I don't have a routine. I'm a right brainer, and right brainers, we don't function on routines. We see the collage of the present moment and everything as one. So I don't divide working life and private life. I think that working life and private life report to the same place called life.
For some reason, I think I'm right brainer, because
you must be.
What you are saying is making a lot of sense to me. Sometimes people say that, okay, it's your weekend, you should go party. I don't feel like it because I'm so happy doing what I'm doing, right? So
I mean, you know, I think you need to be open to everything, you know, and there's a film by Jim Carrey, it's called The Yes Man, and that's always been me. I've always said yes. And then I figure out afterwards, I said yes to that, I better go and do it. And I think that's the greatest motivation, you know, when you say yes, you're committed to do something. Sure. You may not have a plan, but you have to make one and you have to figure it out. And that's the way you learn. True. You know? And you have to make mistakes along the way, but the more mistakes you are, the better you become.
The better you become.
And the more you learn.
The more you learn, true.
So long as you don't keep making the same mistakes, as Einstein said, you know.
Got it.
And I think another thing is everything you do, you must try to keep it simple. Einstein also said, it's simple to complicate, but it's complicated to simplify. So if you have the art of simplicity and you're able to articulate, manage your thinking skills into a simplistic way and look at the root origin of things. So every time I have a project, a task, or anything remotely complex, I create a mind map. First thing I do, any project, any piece of work. And you realize how simple it is once you have a mind map. You have like a tree, you see the central branches of the tree, of course, the main pillars, and where they lead to, and the sub branches, and then the leaves, and you can very quickly figure it out, how things are connected. And if you do a mind map, then the natural flow of things happen. If you write it down linearly, like most people do, you have a title and bullet points, but a lot of them don't make sense. They contradict each other, or they don't interact in the right flow of things. So you do a mind map. That's one way I manage these things. I have mind maps, a lot of mind maps.
We'll discuss that. Let's start with the basic questions, because it's important to know you as a person who has achieved so much. So, Mr. Grant, what inspired you to pursue a career in cruise and maritime industry? How was your childhood, and how did you join the shipping and maritime community?
Well, my father was in the Navy.
Okay.
And I was brought up in my early years in Singapore.
Okay.
And a little bit in Hong Kong. I was born in a naval
base
hospital in Portsmouth. And my great-grandfather was actually the first elected Lord Mayor of Portsmouth. So we have a great naval tradition in Portsmouth. And I was surrounded by ships with my father in the Navy. So in my early teenager years, because after coming back from Singapore and there was not much sun in the UK, I was a bit disappointed with the UK, and I was disappointed with ships. I didn't want to be around ships, to be honest, because when you're a teenager, you want to do the opposite of what your father's doing. So I said, sorry, Dad, I don't do ships. I'm going to be a football player.
Okay.
And I became a football player.
Interesting.
But before I figured it out and got to professional, and I never actually got to professional before I got injured at 21, I did an apprenticeship, which my father arranged for me, and that was in Her Majesty's Dockyard, HMS Dockyard in Portsmouth. So that was shipbuilding, naval shipbuilding. And, I didn't really love the job. I was 4 years, and that's when I really decided I don't do ships at the end of that. But the one thing I did like is going on the yacht Britannia.
Okay.
And I was inspired, but I learned how to build ships. I learned all the intricacies behind the scenes and shipbuilding, and I became a master craftsmanship. I got the full apprenticeship. But then I pursued another life. I went abroad, and I got this injury on my knee, and I was told, go to the sun, because you've got damaged ligaments, and we've done 3 operations, we won't repair you. So go to the sun, swim, train, work out, get away from the damp weather, and maybe in 2 years your ligaments will heal naturally. I went to the sun and never returned. And I think that...
Where was the sun?
Well, initially, I went just to get away from it. So I took a flight to Bangkok.
Okay.
However, it was with Indian Airlines, and it was a bizarre flight because it said London Heathrow and Bangkok. That's it. But I got to the airport. Remember the old days with lots of tickets?
Yeah.
I had loads of tickets in there. I couldn't understand why. And I thought it was a very good price for this ticket. So when I got to the airport, I couldn't find the flight to Bangkok. There was no flight to Bangkok. So I went to the information desk. I said, oh, no, you're with Air India. You're going to Bombay, as it was then.
Yeah.
I said, oh, and then you have to change in Bombay. Okay. So
you have, from Singapore, you go to...
No, this was from London Heathrow. London Heathrow to Bombay. So I went to Heathrow to Bombay, and I got to Bombay. I said, right, where's the connection to Bangkok? Oh, no, not from here. You've got to go to Delhi.
They were so misorganized.
Oh, right. So, and then another ticket. This was 1985. Another ticket.
85.
I got to Delhi, and I said I need to go to Bangkok when I got there, and I was getting a bit tired. I said, "Oh no, not from here. You got to go to Kolkata."
Oh
I
shit!
said, "No, Kolkata as well. You're joking." And I mean, like hours and hours are passing, days. So I got to Kolkata, and the only time I'm really eating is on the plane because I didn't. The airport, I wasn't so sure. In those days, 85, it was very rudimentary to say the least.
Must be very little flights also, maybe 3-4 flights a day or something like that.
Oh, yes, not so many flights, and I had to wait long periods. So when I got to Kolkata, no, there's never been a flight to Bangkok. You have to go to Bombay.
Are you serious?
No, I'm absolutely serious. So I took then a flight to. I said, just come to Bombay in the first place. You're crazy. He said, no.
But were you paying for the flights or it was included?
No. Another ticket ripped off. You had like lots of chances, I couldn't believe this. So I got to Bombay and they told me there's no flight until I think it was like 1.5 days. So I said, no problem. I'm
not going back.
I'll just get out here. He said, no, you can't go. Hey, you're British. I said, yes, I'm sorry about the colonization, but I need to get out. He said, no, you need a visa because you're British. So I said, look, you see this man with the rifle? I'm going to walk right through him to the arrivals because I'm done. I've been going for 3 days.
Yeah.
I'm going to get out of here. And he said, there's no way. And when I said that, they got a little bit worried and they sent me to the visa, this desk where I had to get a visa. And the guy at the visa there said, absolutely not. I cannot get a visa. I said, $50? He said, okay.
Really?
Got the visa? Yes. Got the visa. It was a big visa thing. I don't know how that appeared. You have to slip the money inside the thing, and you got the visa. And
that time, $50.
Then I got out in Bombay, as it was then. And Bombay then was an exciting city, not now.
Very exciting.
Then it's amazing.
True.
So I saw a big sign saying Juhu Beach.
Juhu Beach.
Yeah, Juhu Beach, where all the Bollywood stars are now. But then it was just a beach with some hotels, and I went to this 3-star hotel, and there was no window. Mm-hmm. There was a window, but no glass.
Okay.
And the rats used to come across the windowsill, and they gave you water with things inside. It was crazy, But in a way, I really enjoyed it. So I went down to the reception to complain, and I speak to the manager. And the manager was a Sikh, born with a sword in his hand. And he listened to my complaint so calmly.
Because he could not understand a thing.
No, he understood. At the end of it, he said to me, "What are you doing tonight?" And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "What are you doing tonight?" I said, "Well, I don't have any plans because of this." He said, "You're coming out with me."
Oh, interesting.
And he took me out and he showed me
Bombay.
Yeah, Bombay dreams.
Awesome.
And I learned everything. I learned the culture, all the different religions, the Hindus, the gods, how things worked. And in the end, I had I think it was 3 months or 4, 3 months I was allowed on the visa. And I spent the full time.
No, but have you taken the flight next day?
No. 3 months later.
Oh my God! And you stayed in Mumbai for 3 months.
Yeah, and then I eventually got a flight, and I went to Bangkok.
Yeah.
And then I was supposed to be a 2-week holiday, but I ended up staying there 9 months. And
Interesting.
And that's what first got me abroad. And then I wondered after that why I was kicking a ball around all my life. But after I came back from Thailand, and in Thailand I ran out of money after the 9 months, to be honest, and I had no money. And I didn't know what to do. I was literally down to my last few dollars. And I was sitting, having checked out at the reception, thinking, how am I going to afford to keep living here? Or I have to go home and call my father to bail me out.
True.
And that was the last thing I wanted to do, because I would have perceived to have been a failure. So I remember sitting there and I saw these young men going by dressed as monks, you know, the Buddhist monks. So I asked them, I said, the waiter, I said, who are these guys? And they said, oh, they're all monks. I said, but they're so young. I know they're monks, but they're doing the initiation, sir.
True.
Oh, interesting. I said, how long was that, the initiation? He said, it's 6 weeks. And then I thought, I've got 6 weeks left to last on my ticket.
Okay.
I said, where do they live? He said, in the monastery. And I said, and how do they eat? Oh, they get free food because Lord Buddha. I said, 6 weeks, free food, free accommodation. What could go wrong? I could learn Thai.
Correct.
So I literally got my bags and followed the monks. Yeah, and I got on the bus and I went to the monastery in Kauai, and the rest is history. I became a monk for 6 weeks. Yes.
And then you finished your 6 weeks and...
Well, everything they told you wasn't true because you were given accommodation, but they didn't tell you got to sleep on the floor.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
For sure.
that was difficult.
Yeah.
I was getting clothes and organising things, and then you don't get food. Initially, they give you some, and then you have to go to beg for food.
Freaking hell.
Yes, because you've got to show humility. That's part of the teaching, you know. So that was a great learning, actually. You know,
how old were you
humility. Young 20s, 85. So I have to do the maths, but young 20s. And, you know, that was a profound change in my life, you know. In the end, I made a business out of it because I was like the only white monk.
Yeah,
and the little kids used to go to the park and say, look at that one. And they used to feed me first, of course. I was like the 60-pound gorilla in the park. And they would feed me and I'd feed the other monks. And then I worked my way to get a mattress and a pillow. And then the last part, they teach you meditation, you know, how to meditate, but how to leave your body.
Oh, is it?
Yes, and that's what they teach you. You've got to learn how to leave your body.
Did you?
I thought they were crazy because I was in my young 20s. I mean, how do you leave my body?
Yeah,
what are they talking about? But then I realized, you know, something profound, you know. So I said, well, how can you teach me how to do this? You know, we can't teach you. You can't teach anyone anything. You know, we can take you to the fountain of knowledge, but you have to drink the water. Yeah. And we have to place you and guide you, but then the rest depends on you because it's your own journey. And some people will do and some people will not, you know. So you sit you next to a stone wall or a brick wall. It has to be something natural or wood. Mine was stone. And then you have to imagine going out of yourself. And it doesn't work, you know. And I couldn't keep still initially, but then 24 hours, 48 hours, 3 days, 4 days, 5 days, and then day turns into night, night turns into day, you forget where you are, you lose yourself, and slowly you hear a crack in your crown chakra and you're out. And then you're literally floating and looking back on yourself. Yeah. And inside your crown chakra, you have what's called the pineal gland, and it has a retina. And this has like a Wi-Fi to your spirit. You can't explain it. And as you're floating in your spirit, you can see yourself. And that's a profound experience.
You experienced that?
Yes. Oh, more than once. So, but when you get there, the first thing you do is you don't like, chill out and everything. I was like worried with the spirit. How am I going to get back in?
Yeah, you're out.
And then you think, how am I going to do it? Because I'm so expansive and big. I mean, how am I going to get inside again? But that's actually not so difficult. It's scary when you first do it, but you can, you know, you just know you have to think yourself back in, or, you know, visualize yourself back in, and you're back in, you know. So, and you can travel. That's how you have astro travel. Even military use this to look upon enemy lines. Yeah, it's a skill that very few people have. And the more we get digitalized, the more we use phones, you know, we are losing skills, you know, as human beings. Our ancestors never used to talk.
Yeah, they understood.
They had telepathy,
Correct,
you know,
correct.
and I could do that with my mother. And I remember, you know, when my father died, I was in Miami, And I was late for my flight to Venezuela. And I was just running towards the security. I'd already checked in, running to the security with my boarding card. And I saw a phone and I stopped, frozen. And I went to the phone and called my mother, and I didn't know why. And she said, Grant, I've been standing by the phone for 1 hour telling you to call me. Your father's passed away, honestly. And I just knew to call. I didn't know why, I didn't know how, I just knew, I just call, you know. That's telepathy. And when the emotions are higher and the meaning is higher and the spirituality part is higher, your consciousness can think at 200 frames per second, whereas your brain can only think of like 24 to 60 frames per second. So if you can get into your consciousness, you can, you know, you can do anything, and you can work on a telepathic telepathic level. Sorry about that. Telepathic level, and you know, and you can outthink.
So you think this? A lot of people talk about that you actually can leave your body.
Oh yes,
It's possible. Yeah?
Absolutely. And like it normally happens to people when they hit a life-changing event, a life-threatening event, I should say. You know, like an accident. Like I was in hospital last year, and it happened to me again. You know, and I'm more easy to get out now. You know, so my blood pressure on the upper range went down to 30, and the emergency response team came, and you see this bright light and you're floating towards it. And you're so peaceful. It's a wonderful feeling. But then I heard my son.
Oh.
Not in the way that we hear. Then you know it's a vibrational frequency. And I heard it, and I knew he was in fear, and shot me back in. I said, no, I'm not ready to go, you know. And I came back in again. But that's when it happened only last July again. So this happens. But going back to your original question, so I got back to Thailand, and then I ended up traveling more. And I've been to 161 countries and lived in 30. So I was not into the cruise industry till 1999. I was living in Venezuela, and I was become somewhat of a millionaire in Venezuela.
Okay.
I had a hotel. I was invested into a small hotel. I was invested into a casino amongst other partners, and you know, I invested in companies, music, a band. I had a couple of bands, and also property there. But then they had the Bolivarian Revolution, and you know, I had to go. Chavez had a lista, the Imperialista, the list of imperialists, and I thought I was on the list. I wasn't sure, so I didn't take any chances. And
so you left.
But they nationalized the hotel, and they changed the laws to the casino, and all the business went down, and I had to go. And I'm sitting on the beach, not knowing what to do, and thinking, "Oh, I've got to work again."
No, but
and I get a phone call.
You left Venezuela and you went where? UK?
No. Well, when I was in Venezuela, I got this phone call saying, "Grant, I need you to a friend of mine. I need you to Mark Robinson. I need you to manage a cruise ship."
Okay.
I said, "Mark, I've never been on a cruise ship before, and I'm retired." And then I'm thinking, hang on a minute, I need a job.
Yeah.
And I can get out of Venezuela because this is really, the walls are coming in, you know. So I said, okay, send me a ticket and I'll go and have a look at the ship. And it was just made for me, you know, because it's a cruise ship. You know, I had some experience in casino, I had a hotel, I had a restaurant, a bar. So what do you have on cruise ships? Casinos, restaurants, bars, spas. So this was made for me. My whole background was tours and tour operating, and there's a big element of tour operating on board. So this was really made for me. So I said to him, yes, I'll give it a go. And whatever target you have, I think they had £500,000 above what they've made the previous year, and I told them to double it because they don't know what they're doing.
Yeah.
And we could really do something here, and and the rest is history. And that's how I joined.
So from Venezuela, you went to
Well, I went
Miami?
to Dominican Republic to see the ship.
Okay.
And then I ended up back in the UK.
What was the name of the ship? Do you remember?
The ship was called the Bolero.
The Bolero.
Yeah, the MV Bolero. And it was First Choice Cruises where I started. I was like director of operations. And I had a choice to go to live on board or live ashore. And I decided to live on board. There's only one ship, so I may as well learn the industry from the ship.
True.
And so that was a great experience, and I had no time to think about Venezuela, it just completely left my mind because I was working 16, 18 hours a day, all day, every day on board and learning the trade as well. And I was assigning myself for certain hours to every department and actually do the job to learn what their challenges are, what the pain points were, where the bottlenecks were, how it could affect guest satisfaction. And I took on all the complaints initially because I just wanted to know everything and absorb it. And I had this long line initially of guests trying to complain to me. But then as the weeks and months went on and we trained the team, there were cobwebs in my office because nobody was coming to complain. And we were, proactively anticipating everything. And I learned that on board is a community, and I learned the value of that community and engaging with all the people of all the decks and all the different the different positions on board, whether it be deck, engine, hotel, and it was a great learning curve for me, because I had responsibility for that ship.
I would like to come back to Venezuela story once again.
Yes.
Maybe we'll just talk about this story for 5 more minutes. How did you become millionaire in Venezuela? That's very exciting.
How did I
become millionaire in Venezuela? So how did you land up Venezuela and started business?
Well, Venezuela was a very rich country. It was the longest serving democracy of South America. So when people look at Venezuela today, it was not like that when I went there in 1990. Yeah? And I got a golden job. Yeah? It was a tour operating job, and I had to open Venezuela to the world, to British tourism, basically. And there was an island there called Margarita, Isla de Margarita. And so we had 2 charters a week, and I had to manage that. And then eventually I became the manager of the Caribbean because we had Aruba, Grenada, Dominican Republic, other locations involved. But mostly it was in Margarita. So I did that for 2 years, and I had to go on television a lot, because we were representing like British tourism. I had a lot of connections with the British consulate and embassy, and helped them in Margarita as well. So that went very well. But one winter they decided to pull out, and I still had all the allotments on the planes, and all the tours, everything organized. So I just took over those allotments myself and did the business myself. I still went to Portugal every year for a short summer, which was the low season for Venezuela, and then went the high season for Margarita. But then Margarita became, more and more prosperous, and the tourism exploded. Things were going very well. I was in the right place at the right time. And I was investing every time. I had a Jeep Safari, and we were selling chartered planes to the highest waterfall in the world, Angel Falls. You would fly around Devil's Canyon, and then they would take you to a place called Canaima. We would take them on an adventurous trip under a waterfall, and I would call it the Indiana Jones adventure. And that's when the films were famous at that time, so it really helped the sales. I took the BBC out there and went on a prime time TV program called Jim Will Fix It to show how someone else to be a rep. So it was a good timing more than anything else, and it was all in tourism, which was my area of expertise at the time. So things went very well, but then they went horribly wrong towards the end of the 90s, and the writing was on the wall. And I managed to sell only 2 apartments at the value of 25% of the value, just to get out. When the walls were crushing down. So if one apartment was worth 250, you'd be selling it for 25. Something like that. So it was a crazy time. But life moves on, and I don't think we own anything in this life. And fortunately, I've always felt that. I feel that we are just the custodians of time.
Just the travelers in the world called Earth. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. And it's painful to go back to things. You need to move forward. So it was, I think, and also you need to kick up the arse every so often, and that's what it gave, because I've become complacent and lazy, and not lazy, but I had.
Yeah, you've achieved so much.
I'd lost the challenge of everything,
true.
And I needed a change. I needed a challenge. I needed to, and I was so comfortable in Venezuela, and I learned since that comfort is the enemy of achievement.
True.
When you feel too comfortable,
it's gone.
You're not going to achieve, because you're not going to. It's the pain and the effort and the struggle and the creativity and the focus, and you realize the best times in your life was when you were growing, not when you made it.
When you reached there.
So it's good to make it, finish it all, and then start again, and then you've got all the beauty of going up again, So.
Yeah, in my last podcast, there was a guy called Captain Dhruv. He's from Delhi. I asked him a question. What's so fulfilling about this startup journey? Because he's doing a startup. So he's like, Rajat, the answer is in your question only. It's the journey.
Yes.
So it's the journey which keeps me motivated and, keeps me going. So as you rightly said, it's about the experiences that you get across when you're moving up.
Yes, and I always did things that I was passionate about, that I enjoyed, and that is a great focus to have, to always do what you love, and then you can become a success.
True.
I feel that it's very difficult to be a success in anything if you're not passionate about it.
Yeah, true.
Because and you need that desire. Desire is the fire that makes you want to do something.
Obsession.
Yes. And you need that. Otherwise,
it's very difficult.
You become indefatigable when you have that desire to want to do something. So,
true.
And I had it, but when I lost it, it didn't feel the same.
Okay, so you were with the cruise, that cruise ship, and then from there, where did you move to?
Well, we made that target, and we doubled the revenue, and the next year we had 2 ships. So my job was to work mostly on one and float between the 2 and manage those and make 2 successful operations. That went well. And towards the end of that season, the owners of the ship, they were looking at the revenue, and we were doubling it, and
they'll be like,
they were freaked by that. Yeah. And they said, we need to have this guy.
Who's doing it?
Yeah. So my friend Mark and I, we went to Festival, which was Festival Cruises, and they wanted us to replicate that across a fleet of 8 ships. So in year 2000, I joined Festival and
Festival Cruises.
Festival Cruises. We were the number 2 in Europe at the time, and we did exactly that. We actually it took us 2.5 years, and in the end I was on my own, and then we more than doubled the revenue, the onboard revenue, and that made we also invented a few things to make more money. Like in the past, traditionally, a bridge tour was something that was complimentary. But I started charging for it. But the reason was not only revenue, mostly it was security.
Okay.
I thought it was very insecure to have, potentially up to 100 people going on the bridge.
Yeah. Yeah.
How's that safe?
Yeah.
And many of those people have no particular interest. They're doing it because it's free.
It's free, exactly.
And that means to the people who really are interested, they're not getting any quality in what we're doing.
True.
So I decided we'll offer a quality experience with a glass of champagne
Yeah.
on the bridge, a map, and a proper explanation and details, fact sheets. And so we would make a great experience.
Yeah,
But we would charge for that
Yeah.
because that has a cost to it, And I believe we improved the security overnight. And of course, it became a revenue. It wasn't a particularly high revenue, but it all adds up.
Yeah.
And what happened after that was that all the ships do it now. They sell the bridge tour, mostly.
Which bridge tour are you talking about?
The bridge of the ship, yes.
Ship bridge.
The ship bridge, yeah.
Okay.
So now most cruise lines are following. At the time that I opened, you cannot do that. It's a terrible thing. And
correct.
you're trying to make money.
It's also related to the
commercializing.
safety of navigation, so you have to be very careful on.
Well, this was my point.
Yeah, exactly.
Why should we just have like hundreds of people going through the bridge? At one point, there were so many people. We had 200, and we had to bring them into groups, and it became a lot of work. But not only that, I believe it was insecure. And you had people that weren't really that interested. They were just going. And the quality of the tour was not there.
True.
Whereas if you only had one or two small defined groups with... You're a pilot.
Yeah,
If you go on a cruise ship, you don't want to go with 50, 60 other people on a bridge and walk them through quickly. And, you want to ask questions.
Yeah.
You want to have an experience. You want to look at things and not be rushed. And so that's what we did. We listened to the people really interested, really cared about it, and gave them a quality experience. And we... Also, in doing so, we made the bridge more secure because and the whole thing became more focused, and it was a great success. So after that, we changed the industry because everybody is doing that now.
Correct.
Another thing we did was we offered wedding renewal of wedding vows, and that was already happening, but we did it on steroids.
What was that?
Renewal of wedding vows. So
wedding vows.
Yes, we allow
renewal.
people to renew their
that's a
vows
good idea.
on the bridge.
Correct.
With the captain.
Yeah.
And
nice photographs.
Yeah, my wife was amazing at that. She would, we'd have the chocolates and the bouquet of flowers and champagne. And we would make speeches, and they would go on the captain table. There'd be a whole package.
Were you paying something for the captain or no?
No, not at all.
That's your job.
No, because I don't want extra costs, So most captains really embraced it, and they did a fantastic job. But they realised it was revenue for the company.
For sure.
But unless we got a tear at the wedding, we weren't happy.
Correct.
But it was a great job. Again, we gave quality, and word would get about on the ship, and then a lot of people would decide to renew the vows. So
that sounds such an interesting idea of a startup.
Yes.
You have a website where you can have renewal of your wedding vows on Costa or on Princess or whatever.
Yes, it still happens today, but not the way we were doing it. Not the same quality, not the same occasion, and not the same volume, because we had good volume actually. Some people would go on a cruise, find out that this was a possibility, book another cruise just to go to renew their vows, but to renew it with us because they knew the quality that they would get. They knew that this was a major experience. We really tried to do something special, to make it a special occasion. And as I said, they were on the captain's table as well. And there were other informal meetings we would have with them to make sure we would customize the experience as well.
Okay, Holmes, what was the defining moment in your career where you decided, okay, this is it? Was it that body leaving kind of experience, or
No, I don't think there is a defining moment. There were multiple defining moments, in my opinion. And if I would break down my life, I would say that life was a series of short stories, and I would go through one thing and the other. And that will be, I'm going to write a book when I get around to it on it. And I've actually started the book, and the book will be called Tales of Serendipity.
okay,
So in my life, I always ended up to do one thing, and then I ended up doing another thing, you know.
Okay.
And but the journey, I would have a target and a vision, but the journey would take me somewhere else. Life would take me somewhere else.
life happens.
And some things I didn't want to do, I ended up doing, like ships. You know?
Yeah,
I told my father, "Sorry, Dad, after the dockyard, I don't do ships."
Destiny.
And my whole career now is ships, you know. So I think there were many moments in my life where, you know, I think I've made it, but then I realize I'm on another level, and it's just another experience that I'm going through. So I've embraced every experience and every short story of my life, you know. And I've always been that yes man.
Yeah,
and I
interesting.
keep saying yes, you know. Sometimes my wife says, "Oh, we should stop saying yes."
Okay, Holmes, the cruise industry is known for its dynamic challenges. What was one of the toughest decisions you have had to make as a leader? Toughest decision?
Well, it was the end of festival cruises. I was in Egypt at the time, and we had one ship arrested because I was in charge of all the onboard revenue and all the tour operations and shore excursions. But there was a financing issue in the background. It was nothing to do with what we were doing, but consequentially affected us. And one ship got arrested. And then when one gets arrested, they go down like dominoes. And I got a call from the chairman saying, "You've got to get on the ship. You're in Egypt and the ship's in Egypt." I said, "I'm going anyway, but you got to go there now because you have to stop it being arrested." I mean, how do you figure that out, you know? So I remember speaking to our agent and saying, "Look, you can't, you know, I need your help. I need you to help me get the ship out." Yeah. And so we sailed the ship out. We did get out of Alexandria at the time. And then on board, we had to figure out what to do. So we went to Limassol, which was the next port.
Oh, you managed not to arrest the ship?
No, we didn't get arrested in
You sold the ship?
Alexandria. No, but it's a long story. So
Okay, let's not get into that.
We got from Alexandria, and then it went to Limassol.
Limassol, okay.
And then I managed to close the port in Limassol and figure out what to do, because our chairman was the ambassador of Cyprus to the Vatican, and Limassol being the main port in Cyprus. And then we decided, you know, we would do our best to get back to Venice. And we had all these different challenges along the way, and the guests on board. It was a very difficult situation, you know, because the guests could realize something was wrong, and there was all sorts of complaints. But, you know, I've been with these crew, because these same crew were on the Bolero with me, a lot of them.
Okay.
And, you know, they trusted me. And there were moments I said, "Look, whatever happens, we have to stay together and we focus. We have to take care of these guests. It's not, you know, and we made sure that every guest got an insurance report, and we gave them the best experience we could under the circumstances. And we have to get the ship back. And then I have to get cash because the company's going down, and I have to pay the crew. And I want to make sure the crew get their money, you know. So I made 50% sale in the shops for cash, 50% sale in the spa, you know, everything was at 50%.
Yeah.
Cancel your account for 50%, and then they even upped it at one point. So, and I had everybody. I said, I don't want any variation of the story. This is the narrative. This is how we are. This is what it is. And everybody, I was so proud. They followed, and whatever the challenge, they followed. You know, and we worked together as a team. And we got the cash in and we paid all the crew. And then we moved the crew from that ship when we got to Gibraltar, because it was a planned arrest in Gibraltar by the bank itself.
Oh, okay.
That was the plan.
Yeah.
Get the ship somehow to Gibraltar. But you got to offload the passengers first.
True,
So this was almost impossible, but we did it.
Where did you disembark the crew?
We disembarked the
passengers.
passengers in Ravenna, in Italy.
Italy,
It should have been Venice.
Yeah,
but
you told
if
me,
we'd
yeah.
gone there, we got arrested. So we went to Ravenna. We brought the buses round and we bussed everybody back.
And now only the crew on board and Gibraltar the ship.
Yes, and we had to leave very quickly. It was a very difficult time. And that's another book, that whole story.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Also with the banker, we're going to do that together, because he was guiding me from his side, and we were working together with the captain and the crew. But it was a moment when you realize that leadership counts.
Yeah, for sure.
And if the people trust you, however high or big the challenge, you can do it together.
Right, yeah.
And on board a cruise ship, the greatest acid test of a team is when things go wrong, because you're at sea.
True.
And if you work together, you can make it happen. And we did. And that's what I think was one of my defining moments of leadership, overcoming that, almost the impossible, and still getting the ship to
I still have this
Gibraltar.
question. How did you manage not to get arrested in Alexandria?
The agents help,
Yeah.
and a port agent is very important.
Yeah.
And the getting away early, because the agent himself could have arrested. But we have been working together all the years, and I'm still a great friend of mine now. And we, all those years were remembered, those years of collaboration, those years of support. And he supported to allow the ship to go. And, it worked. We got out. But the same thing happened in Limassol.
Yeah.
And the same thing happened in Crete.
Crete-
I had to do it the whole itinerary.
From Limassol to Crete you went, yeah?
Yes.
And
But
then
it should
to
have been
Ravenna.
Alanya. But I got a tip of don't go to Alanya.
Oh, okay.
From my friends in Alanya. So we went to Crete.
So maybe the agents in Alalia, they know that something is...
Yes, and also it was supposed to go to Piraeus, but we realized something could happen there. So we went to Crete. And anyway, there were storms around.
Must have been very difficult to convince the passengers that we are changing the port so often.
Impossible, almost, and but also there were storms around, so
Yeah, you had a reason.
we had one, and it was it was in the winter, it was in January in the Mediterranean.
Must be cold,
so
yeah.
it was a very difficult cruise, but I got entertainment to do more shows than usual. We gave free champagne.
You had to
we
somehow manage
did
the
our
experience.
level best
Yes,
to give
yes.
the guests. But when
Good
they
experience,
complained, at one point it was almost impossible. So we had multiple nationalities on board. So we did it like Noah's in the Ark. We took two people for each nationality to represent them, and we opened the book and told them what was happening, and we tried to reason with them, and we also had a technical issue on the ship at the same time. It was everything going wrong, but we held it together. And the guests say we went hardly to anywhere that the ship was supposed to go. The weather was terrible.
Yeah.
Great crew.
Great. Great.
When you see
It's
that,
all about experience. Yeah, true.
it was amazing.
True.
So, we worked hard to make sure the guests were safely offloaded, and that we could disembark them in a great way, that we could provide the transportation for them, because all of that was provided. And then we could sail the ship. We had to go very slowly from Ravenna to Gibraltar. And it took us 6 days because we had hardly any fuel. And we couldn't stop for fuel.
Running economy, yeah. Okay.
So it was unbelievable what happened in this day and age. And for 10 years, I couldn't talk about it.
Yeah.
Because of legal reasons, but now we can, and we'll make a book one day about it, because that experience. But that the leadership qualities required to do that at that time was nigh impossible. So this was the acid test for me.
Interesting. Okay, let's move to the next one. You've worked with multiple cruise brands. What differentiates a successful cruise company with an average one?
The people. At the end of the day, a ship is a ship. The facilities, the services, the cabins are pretty much all similar. There are differences, and they make big issue about the small points of differentiation that there are. But what makes the difference is people. So the differentiation is how you treat your crew. Crew, as we learned in COVID, are essential workers, but on cruise ships, they're quintessential workers.
Yeah.
You need fantastic crew, and you need to treat them well, and you need to give them a career path. You need to train them, motivate them, mentor them. And those cruise lines, they get that right and then blend it with a great product, they're successful. Those cruise ships that look at the crew as a commodity,
Crew is a crew.
they fail.
Yeah.
They get the crew cheaper. They don't really, training too expensive, and safety, because again, the crew are going to take care of your safety as well. At the end of the day, who's taking care of the safety?
True.
It's people.
People.
Whether in the deck, the engine, and every crew member has a safety role. So I still think that most cruise lines are underinvesting on the crew. And I went heavily into that because I used to run a company, and we trained 75,000 crew for different cruise lines. And those spent the most money on investing in their crew are the most successful. There's no doubt about it. But part of that is you still have to challenge them, and you still have to motivate them and give them a career path and make them feel part of something.
Yeah.
And then they'll come contract after contract and deliver and deliver.
True.
And so the difference is the people at the end of the day. And there's not even a question about that. All the rest is superfluous, just talking points. And
True.
or we've got a wave rider, we have a water park, we have this, and but there are many ships without water parks, but people choose to cruise on that ship. Why? It's the people. And how do we know that? Because my very first project on the Bolero, I learned very quickly the importance of the people. That's why I spent so long with them.
Correct.
And every single person, and I was in charge of the operation, every single person knew me by first name. And I'd know their first name.
Okay.
And I'd know every single one of them, all 300 of them, because they were important.
Yeah.
They were crucial to the business.
Yeah.
And I realized that at that time, tips were very sensitive. And if we could get the right tips, we could get the right quality of service delivery, So I used to personally make a speech every single week. I made it a very comical one. I made it a big show. But we got the tips.
We got the tips.
And the crew were motivated. And they knew that I was standing up personally and doing that. True. And they would run for you.
True.
So when it came to that day of the arrests, those same crew were there for me. They remembered. And so the answer is simple. It's people.
It's the people. Okay, are there any different type of cruise ships?
Absolutely. So let's give you a framework. There are approximately 505, my last exact count, 505 cruise ships on the planet.
Okay.
That's all. That's not a lot when you consider there are 16,000 cargo ships, 12,000 tankers,
Correct.
7,000, I think, oil tankers, and 5,000 chemical tankers. So only 505 cruise ships. This is a very small number at the end of the day. People think there are thousands, but there's not. There's only 505. And if you take that 505, you can classify them into 4 categories. And I actually made my own classification. The first category is what everybody thinks is a cruise ship, which is a mega ship. A mega ship is something I would say was 2,500 passengers and
Plus,
above.
yeah.
And it's got state-of-the-art hardware. It's got an enormous range of facilities and services, water parks, ice rinks, 60 cinemas, giant theaters, great animation, live music, Broadway shows. They have everything, and services, amenities, and facilities. And the ship is the destination when it comes to mega. The ship is my castle, they say. And I would say it's like 5-star hardware, but the service cannot be 5-star.
Oh, okay. The hardware is 5-star. Yeah, okay.
5-star hardware. But you cannot give 5-star services if you've got more than 2,500 people. Logic will tell you that. Yeah. It doesn't matter how good the ship is. So you have, a 4-star plus service, and then you've got the passengers. And the demographics are mixed. If they have an inside cabin, it's not going to be a 5-star passenger. It's going to be a 3-star passenger. But then you get to the suites, you've got a 5-star passenger, so that could be mixed. So, but the most important thing is that it's economy of scale.
Yeah.
It's a mass economy
It's
of
a
scale.
mass, yeah.
And that's how it works. And it's a great value for money. Fantastic.
True.
Yeah. And so that will be the mega category. Then you've got what we call discovery.
Okay.
Now, discovery ships, they used to be mega ships years ago. They were mega, but now they're too small to be mega. So your big lines like Royal Caribbean, Carnival, NCL, they will sell off the smaller mega ships because they don't meet the economy of scale requirements.
Okay.
And they will sell to other companies that would refit, refresh, relaunch, rebrand, and reinvigorate the ship completely. And they would focus the ship on the destination and not the ship itself.
Oh, okay.
So the itineraries become more important than the than the ship, because the ship doesn't have, it's smaller, doesn't have the same number of facilities and services. Yes. Therefore, they focus the ship on the destination, and itineraries become critical, and they organize these attractive destinations to attract people to go there. These ships tend to be more traditional as well. The ships are older and mature, and so are the guests on board. They're more mature, and things like a Captain Cocktail and a Baked Alaska, these traditions will be kept. Those old cruise traditions are kept in the discovery market mostly. Companies like Fred Olsen, for example, Celestial, companies. Yeah. Then you have what we call luxury. Luxury is 5-star hardware, 5-star service, 5-star passengers. If a mega ship is selling at $150 per day, a luxury ship is $500 to $1,000 a day. Yeah, completely different. You've got entrepreneurs, CEOs, big businessmen, and these ships are more slow cruising. You spend longer in port. They go to exotic destinations. Completely different, and the entertainment's not the big focus. It's about relaxing, about about seeing the world in a nice pace.
That reminds me, there's a ship called the World.
Well, I'll come on to the world.
We'll come to that.
Because the world is actually, we're creating a 5th category.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So the 4th category is expedition.
Okay.
Expedition it traditionally was about polar bears and penguins. Polar bears in the Arctic and penguins in the Antarctic. It's about adventure. It's about getting out there and witnessing nature and biology firsthand.
True.
Getting your hands dirty, getting involved. And it's all about fitness and the feeling of embracing nature. And we don't have a cruise call, you have a landing. You land on the snow. It's very different. But today, it's changing because we are seeing the dynamic of warm water expedition. And they will go to the Amazon. I'm deeply involved in the Amazon, the Congo, I've got lots of cruise calls now in Guinea-Bissau, Senegal, getting into the different tributaries and rivers of Africa. Africa's becoming more popular.
Yeah.
So there are lots of adventure opportunities around the world that the expedition lines are, seizing. And so those are the four main segments, but there's a fifth segment coming out now, we call residential cruising. And what's different here is the guests are not guests, they are residents because they own the cabin.
Wow. You
And
can
they
own the
actually-
cabin on the ship.
Oh, yes. And you can sail around the world and you actually own the cabin. And the most successful to date of residential cruising is the world.
The world. Yeah, that's...
You see the world on the world, which you own.
I have been fortunate enough to pilot the world in Goa.
In Goa. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. We would have been the agent, actually. But the world, we help the itineraries of the world, but it's quite complex because
It's quite complex, yeah.
the owners of the world,
They decide.
choose their own itinerary.
Correct.
So you have to come up with 3 versions, and then they vote, and then they choose
Yeah,
that
there's a
one.
voting also, yeah.
And some of the places are impossible to go to, so you have to do another version. But it's really amazing how they put this together, and it's been so successful. The world keeps going and going, and the ship is beautiful as well, and it would be in the luxury segment as an operation, but it's residential.
Yeah.
And now you have Villa V, a new residential cruise line.
What's that?
They're from Florida, and they're sailing the world, and in the Odyssey, their ship. And this is a wonderful new brand that's
Villa V.
It's Villa V. We are the global agents, and it's really working. And you can see the world, but not at the same rates as the world. You can do it much more cost effectively.
Oh, is it? Oh,
Yeah,
interesting.
And you can choose to go full in and buy, or you can lease for a
out.
period.
Very interesting.
And Villa V is turning out to be a successful product. They're doing really well. And it's completely global, and they see the world even slower than a luxury line.
Oh, wow.
They might spend 2, 3, 4 days in a port.
That's the best thing, I would
It's
say.
the best thing.
I see in Goa, the cruise ships, they used to stay maximum of 12 hours, 8 to 12 hours.
Yes, normally 8.
Normally 8 to 12
And
hours.
it depends on the segment. A luxury will spend longer.
Yeah.
The mega will spend less because they want to get you back on board to spend the money on board, for the onboard revenue.
If you go out, you spend money there.
But many of the guests don't even leave on a mega ship, because you go for the ship.
Correct.
So that's totally understandable.
Yeah. So Costa falls into which category? Costa. Mega.
Yeah. Give me the cruise line, I'll give you the sector.
Aida.
Mega.
Norwegian cruise lines.
Mega.
Okay. And Queen Elizabeth.
Mega.
I think Goa has mostly mega ships. The world is luxury, you said, yeah?
The world is residential.
Yeah.
And there's one residential line where they're building the first ever purpose-built residential cruise ship, and that's called Storylines.
Storylines.
The MV Narrative. And I've been helping
I love
that
the name,
project.
man.
It's a
Storylines.
wonderful, yes. It's a narrative, and this is building a beautiful community on board, where they will have a school. They're going to have one entire deck for water sports.
Okay.
The world's biggest spa.
Okay.
A life extension center.
Maybe one podcast for me as well. Podcast studio on board.
You have to, podcast studio for you. Get a cabin, can be arranged.
Yeah.
They're going to be, I think, 40 lounges and 20
How big
restaurants
is the ship gonna be?
and a microbrewery. I mean, this is unheard of.
Man.
And this is a product, but it won't be till 2028 when this amazing. It's just shy of $1 billion the build. It'll be in Croatia. So this is also a very interesting project that's coming out, and you're going to see down the line. You watch out for Miami Sea Trade, more announcements about residential.
Miami Sea Trade.
Yes, so officially I'm going to include that as a new segment.
Okay.
So there's your 5 segments. And any cruise line you think of, you can tell, because I was the one who created the classifications. I remember putting them all in and evaluating them.
Yeah, I piloted Costa, Aida, Celebrity cruises.
Mega.
Celebrity again, mega. Yeah, I mean, that's all. What else? Princes?
Princess is mega. Silver Sea,
No.
that's luxury.
I think Goa, we had mega or maybe 2 times the world.
See, you wouldn't get in Goa. You would get mostly mega,
Yeah,
but
true.
you would have some luxury ships. I know that Silver Sea had been there before. That's why I said it. And
Discovery cruises have been there. Discovery, I don't know.
Not
Was the name Discovery?
maybe Fred Olsen has been there. Yeah, maybe Saga in the distant past, and Celestial not. They've not been there. Thompson have been there.
Not that I
Thompson
can
Cruises, which is now Morella.
recall. No.
That's Discovery. So there are some that I'm
I think
sure
as
have
you
been
see,
there. But
India
not
is
expedition. I don't think
no
many
way.
expedition.
No way.
It's not an expedition destination. It's the flagship of all tourism in India, Goa.
And mostly the passengers on board on the Goa cruises were the old age people only. I've hardly seen anybody of my age or maybe
We
they are
don't
the
call
retirees.
them old
yeah.
age. We call them mature.
Matured, yeah. Sorry for that. Yeah, matured passengers. Right.
Yes. Well, and some of them, they're quite mature. I'm 61. But if I go on a Fred Olsen ship, I feel like a teenager, because it's much more mature. But I admire these people. I would do the same. They're going to see the world.
Yeah.
In their latter years, they got disposable incomes.
True.
And many of them are centurions.
Centurions.
Yeah, a centurion is classified by the person who has been to 100 countries.
Oh, okay.
So some people are stuck on like 90, and you have to go on a cruise to get the other 10. Because
yeah.
I know some people that literally come off the gangway, stand on the gangway, and then they tick Papua New Guinea done.
This place is done.
Yeah. So just to get the 100 countries, because it's a whole club. There's centurions. I'm a centurion. So
I'm sure.
I've got 161, but that's
I lost the count.
because it's not just countries; it's also territories, and you have to calculate and count how many you've done. So it gets interesting when you get close to 100. The trouble with me, to get more countries, the ones I've got left, they're not on the sea.
No.
True. And I don't like landlocked countries as much, being as
so you're not a Switzerland fan.
seaman. So it's difficult for me to get any more.
Okay, the next topic is going to be the cruise industry trends. So the cruise industry has experienced several pivotal events in 21st century. Let's discuss the first one, which is 9/11 attacks and their aftermath. Do you have something to say about that?
Well, everything that needs to be said about 9/11 was said, but the story still goes on about how it happened, and I feel that we don't know truly what really happened and what the causes were. I think it affected the psyche of the American people, and what I could say is that almost 50% of all cruising source markets come from North America.
Okay.
So it would have impacted in some way the psyche of the American people, and that in a way affected the market. However, I'm not sure at the time what the sales were, but most people that are cruising, are around the edges of America. New York has only a short season of cruising, so the impact globally, I don't think was so great.
It was not much, okay.
But then it's about the risk to travel that had a psychological impact for some people, when this happened. And we had lots of stories at the time about security. What are the threats of terrorism to a cruise ship? How easy is it to get access to the ship? And that's why ISPS became very important, because you create barriers around the port as a safety mechanism. In fact, one important thing about ISPS is that I was involved in 2001 in the G8 summit when it was in Genoa, because it was on 3 festival ships.
Okay.
And and there were riots at that point, but the fact we had the port, everything was safe.
Yeah.
So that ISPS and the boundaries, almost a fortification lines, were really helpful for the G8 summit, which was marred by all these terrible riots. And
It was in Geneva.
in Genoa, yes.
Geneva.
I was living in Genoa at the time. So I think in that sense, security, the impact on security, the threat of a terrorist attack on a cruise ship, because what we all realize in the industry is that if any ship gets affected by terrorism, that's it for the whole industry.
Yeah, true.
Because
very difficult
collectively, the industry really worked hard on security, and likewise the ports. People would think twice about security on the itineraries. They wouldn't necessarily go to a place without ISPS, you know. So I think those things came into view more, and the fundamental psyche of the greatest source market on earth for cruising, which is the Americans. So that affected them. However, it wasn't a dramatic effect on the cruise industry.
Not significant.
It was about the risk more than anything else that was that caused a lot of concern at the time.
So, okay, Costa Concordia disaster 2012. This has been a major disaster.
It was a disaster, and it did affect cruising. And I've been on that ship, it must have been 20 times. I was a consultant to Costa at the time for training, training the crew and preparing them before they went on board for training in the different schools around the world. And I knew a lot of people on board at the time, and I heard the harrowing stories that they experienced, and it was really a terrible thing. The ship was off course, and we all know that now. It was off course, but it was always off course. So it always went off course around that area. It just happened to hit that underwater mountain and the peak of it, and it got that big gash.
I think the bridge team was distracted at that time.
No, that's what the stories say. They weren't monitoring it properly. I don't think they were really distracted. They just weren't following protocol. That's the problem. These stories about the international hostess distracting the captain and all that was happening all the time. Yeah. That was a normal distraction, to be honest. And the waving of the people on the shore, that's a story for the media, because the reason why the ship went closer to the shore, and many captains used to do it, I don't think they do it anymore,
for the signal,
is not to wave to the passengers on the shore and all that. I mean, that may have happened, but it wasn't the reason. It's because it was gala night.
Was that?
If you sail closer to the shore, the ship is calmer. Yeah?
That's also...
And that was the reason. They used to care about the guests on board and not, disturbing the ship while they're having a gala dinner.
Yeah.
And that used to happen a lot. But of course, if you're going off course and you don't have your radar on and nobody's looking at it, that's a problem, a big problem.
True.
And what they claimed is not on the maps, on the physical maps, but it would have been on the radar. So, nautically, I don't want to comment too much because it's not my field.
Yeah.
But I know that those sorts of attractions happen all the time. But A, you don't go off course. You don't, because it's been mapped out. Yeah, if you're a captain, and B, you can't just go off course because of a gala dinner or something like that. You can't get distracted. And B, you always have a navigational officer watching the radar, always, come what may. Even if you've done it a million times before, you still have to follow that. And now, Carnival have been very proactive since. They've learned, and they've got a fantastic, I've seen it, I've been there, witnessed it myself in Miami. They've got an amazing operational center where they can see the tracking of all the ships.
The ships, yeah.
And I've been to
In
it.
real time.
In real time, yes. And every ship is being tracked. And many other cruise lines, I've seen the one of MSC as well, and it's impressive. And I know they all have, and they've been very proactive. So whilst it was tragic, I believe it was 36 people passed away. It was just awful and tragic. Many of them panicked and hid in their cabins and drowned. But there were heroes. The cruise director, who I trained many times, he helped many guests swim to safety in the rocks. Can you believe that? Unbelievable.
The water must have been cold as well, yeah?
Freezing.
Freaking cold.
I have a friend that was on board at the time. She was in training in HR, and she had a pink dress on and stilettos.
Okay.
When this happened. And they had the call to go to the cabin, and she's been on board many times. She knew something was wrong, big wrong, and she went straight to the lifeboat. She went straight there. She didn't go to the cabin. She went straight to the lifeboat because she knows that when you're crew, you go to life raft.
Yeah.
And that decision was, she had stilettos on a pink dress, and she still went straight to the muster station. Yeah, and not going back to the cabin or nothing like that. And that's what you're supposed to do. So that was, she told me, I knew something was wrong. And I had many, first-hand witness accounts of what happened there. It was bad. Of course, what the captain did was wrong.
It was very wrong.
Profoundly wrong.
Yeah.
Now, since then, they do psychometric tests, which I was calling for before the Concordia. I was in the training world. In my view, every captain had to have a psychometric test. I was doing leadership training as one of the things that I'd suggested that all captains go through psychometric testing, which now happens as mandatory. But at the time, it wasn't happening. So I think we've got the right checks and balances in place now.
No.
And remember that what I said earlier, you have to make mistakes to learn. And sometimes those mistakes are catastrophic. But sometimes the bigger the mistake, the bigger the change.
Yeah.
And that has happened in the cruise industry. So I truly believe we've learned, and Costa's learned it heart out of Costa, which is an incredible brand for over 70 years. This is an amazing brand, and the people were really, there was a dark cloud over Genoa for a long time after that incident. But we've learned a lot, and I believe that's been spread across the whole industry.
For sure.
And complacency is a lot less now, which is a good thing.
Okay, Holmes, there's an expansion of private cruise destinations. This is your expertise. Let's talk about that. For example, Carnival Celebration Key in Grand Bahama.
Yes.
Royal Caribbean's Perfect Day at Coco Cay. So tell us about that as well.
Well, I actually did some consultancy for Royal Caribbean on Coco Cay. I mean, firstly, a private destination is a day's relax on the beach. But it's also got quite a high revenue, because if the cruise line is leasing the island, like the case of Coco Cay, Labadee, the Bahama example, most of them are in the Bahamas, but Labadee is actually in Haiti, on the north coast of Haiti. So if you lease the island, then all the activities on board are yours, and they become short excursions, and it has a good revenue generation. And I always say that the cruise operation is entirely manageable, because you manage everything on a cruise ship. and we know everything about the guests. If you think about it, the guests have a card. They come in and out.
True.
We know when they come in, when they come out.
True.
When, you know, the same card gets them into the cabin, the same card they spend on board. And every time they spend on board, we know what time it was, who served them,
Correct.
what their preferences are. So we learn and we build up. But we lose that the moment they go ashore.
Yes.
But not with a private island.
Oh,
Because they're still
with you.
almost, the private island is an extension to the ship.
Yeah.
So you still have that guest, and you can make sure that the experience is the same level as on board. And a lot of cruise lines see it that way, that they can control and manage the experience ashore because they lease the island, they control the destination. So it's very focused on that control element of the experience, the guest experience. And there is a revenue side to it as well. You know, you have the destination, and if you're leasing the island over a long period, it becomes financially viable as well, because you have to pay a lot of port taxes every time you go to a different destination. So that's another reason for it. So it's the control. And then in some cases, it's good to have a relaxing day on the island, you know, and a break from the usual manic shopping.
So basically, you're saying that the cruise ships, or let's say the cruise companies, they lease out the entire island.
Yes, not in all cases. In some cases, the private island experience is leased, where the cruise line has a lease with the government of like the Bahamas.
Okay.
And then all the infrastructure on that island and local employment is all generated by the cruise line.
Yeah.
So it has
And they will have a revenue sharing with the government or something like that.
no, the lease.
They lease, yeah.
But it depends on the contracts of the
Yeah,
lease. I've
yeah.
not seen all of
Yeah,
those
yeah,
contracts. There are other islands that you may not know that I opened. One was Cayo Levantado, which was in Dominican Republic.
Okay.
Isla Catalina, which is the Costa island. I didn't open that, but that was a Costa baby. There's Meru Island. We put the festival ship in Meru Island. That was a private island.
Where is it?
Wasn't leased, but that's in the Grenadines.
Ah.
Yeah. And that still operates today. Jean-Marc is the
Anything
great
in
man
Asia?
that
No.
runs that. Sorry?
Any islands in Asia?
Well, I did the feasibility study for Surbanias Island in Abu Dhabi.
Okay.
It's an island off Abu Dhabi. It's
Okay.
a cay of 3.8 kilometers long. And 2012, we did the first looks of it. 2014, we set it up. And this, from just a muddy cay of 3.8 kilometers long, thin strip, we turned it into a paradise island just off Surbanias Island.
Yeah.
And Abu Dhabi Ports invested in a very positive way. They put also a long pier there, and they have sunbeds and sun umbrellas and cabanas and barbecue areas and activities, and you can get a jeep safari onto Surbanias Island, where you've got I think there are 36 giraffes and 4 cheetahs, and
But that island is not connected to Abu Dhabi.
no,
Not by road.
It's a completely separate island.
Okay.
Yeah, and the waters around it are controlled by ADNOC.
Yeah. Okay.
But the passenger experience is wonderful in Surbanias, and now, you know, they're targeting up to 140,000 passengers on the island. You know, it's been a big success story.
Yeah, for sure.
Surbanias. It makes me very proud, because I did the original feasibility study, and I think the Abu Dhabi port should be very proud what they've done, because this was revolutionary when it happened in this area.
How big the ship can go? What length ship can go there?
They can take almost anything, because they have a
good draft.
It's more than 300 meters. They can take.
Okay.
So
I haven't heard about it. Maybe I'll have to look into it.
you have to look at somebody. Let me know, and I'll organize for you to go there.
Thank you so much.
But it's been a big success, and ADNEC, Abu Dhabi National Exhibition Company, and their companies like Tourism 365, they run all the tours on the island to these safaris.
Interesting.
It's like a mini wildlife
Yeah,
park, you know. There they got many hundreds of Arabian onyx, an endangered species. So it's wonderful what they've done there, out of nothing, and beautiful bright white sands from Egypt have been put there.
Oh, you did that?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
All imported, but the whole thing looks beautiful.
But there's no hotels on the island.
Yes, well, in Souvenirs there is. There's 2 hotels, or 3. The Anatara chain.
Anantara,
Yes,
okay,
yes.
Anantara chain.
And I've stayed there, and it's wonderful.
interesting.
But the quay where
The ship
the
parks,
cruise
yeah,
ship goes to is separated from the island. But we created a bridge,
Okay.
an original plan, that was environmentally friendly, so the water goes underneath.
Okay.
And they have non-motorized water sports on the
You
island.
know, the best thing about the Persian Gulf is you don't have waves like you have in Arabian Sea. In monsoon, the Arabian Sea goes crazy. You know that, right?
Of course.
I mean, so that's the best thing. This is a blessing to this place, you know.
Yes.
I've seen waves of 4 meters, 5 meters height.
Oh,
and
easy.
I'm about to board the ship and my boat is going up and down. So I have seen that. But when I came here, it's much easy, you know.
Yeah.
But still, like the people here who have been piloting here for a while, they feel 2 meters is too high. For me, it's like,
Yeah, me too. I mean, I've been around, and I've had the Bay of Biscayne, the Gulf of Lions. I've been through those
Bay of Biscay is
so
super
many
crazy.
times, and
crazy,
they're frightening sometimes.
They are.
Once I was on a ship and it completely tipped, a cruise ship, and then it like hovered there, and everybody like falling down that end, and then it popped up.
Yeah, from the other wave. Yeah.
And we had broken bones on board, but that doesn't happen anymore. The stabilizers on the
Now
new cruise ships are very, very strong. And, that was my era, but now things improved dramatically.
Yeah. Okay, so Holmes, let's move to the next question, which is a tragic one, I would say, for the hospitality and cruise industry. How was the experience with COVID-19? Because industry shut down, how did you manage?
It's devastating. Absolutely devastating. We always thought in the cruise industry we were resilient and we were robust. We were getting through recessions without a problem. We thought we were untouchable, and how wrong we were, because COVID absolutely devastated the cruise industry. And if I give you a frame to understand the trajectory of things, because we're only just getting fully over it, to be honest. 2020 we frame as the year of crisis. That's when the crisis happened in March.
True.
And we weren't ready for it. Nobody could see it coming. Although I was consulting the Vanilla Islands, and I made a SWOT analysis, and I put risk number 6, potential global pandemic.
You did that?
Yeah.
How did you know?
In 2019. No, because I didn't predict it. I said on the SWOT analysis it was a risk that could happen to the cruise industry. There were 10 risks.
True.
And I had to predict all the potential risks. And because I did that exercise, I came out with the global pandemic. But of course, when it happened, then, I never expected it to happen. Even though I stated it as one of the risks. But when it did happen, I was possibly the least surprised, because everyone else was totally gobsmacked, didn't know where it came from, left field. But I had predicted that potential outcome just as a potential outcome. Now, so 2020 was the year of crisis. 2021 was the year of restart.
Yep.
Just restarting at a loss.
At a loss.
No cruise line made money in 2021. They all lost. But they just had to restart to build confidence, on cruising again. Many of them had to do all sorts of things with their share and their capital to refinance, to, find ways out of because imagine the entire industry was paused. And what other industry could survive with no money, nothing coming in? And I don't know if you're aware, but there's only two areas of income for a cruise line. Only two. One is, and the same source, which is the guest. One, they buy the cabin, the cruise ticket, and the second is the onboard revenue.
True. That's it.
But it's the same source, the
Same
guest.
source. Yeah.
So when you immobilize the guest and you lock them up in their house,
Zero.
your source is gone, and it was impossible to operate. And the year of restart was very difficult. Protocols, completely, a lot of them unnecessary, to be honest, totally unnecessary. And they were making them up as they went along. I tried to write the protocols for some countries in order to get a harmony. I created a system, but it was the health departments of each country that was taking over, and there was no plan. Some were copying some, and some were copying the others, and some were just making it up as they went along, I know there was good intentions there, but some terrible things happened during COVID. And I believe that more people died since COVID than actually of COVID. Mm. And that's another long story. And there are many, many factors, including the impact of the lockdowns, which is still having an impact today. People not getting cancer screened. And many countries are suffering, not only cruise lines, countries that spent so much money furloughing people and keeping the economy alive while locking people down and shutting down the economy, I'm proud to say that I lived in the UAE where that happened to a minimum, and especially Dubai. Dubai was a beacon of light during the COVID years. So 21, we restarted, and the complexity of the protocols was almost impossible to manage as a port agent. You have to, in some cruises you have to have multiple PCR tests.
Yeah.
But PCR test was created by a man called Kerry Mullis, and he said they should never be used for testing viruses. And he died before COVID, just before COVID actually, which is very interesting timing of his death. He wasn't there to say, hey, my test should not be used for viruses. So the PCR test now, you can see in the WHO,
it's not required.
The PCR test cannot tell the difference between COVID-19 and the flu, which says it all. So the complexity of buying, some countries and places charging 150 euros, which is one night on board, for one PCR test, and maybe you need 3 or 4 on a cruise. On a very long cruise, you need more. It became impossible. And the poor cruise lines were trying to pay for all this, keep the company going, and still operate at a loss in 21. In 22 was a year of recovery.
Yep.
Not full recovery, just recovery.
We
started to recover.
Yeah.
At the beginning of the year, most itineraries lost money, but towards the end of the year and in the summer period for the Mediterranean, things started to ease, and restrictions started to go off. Leading countries like Greece, for Europe, Greece was the one.
Yeah,
wonderful what the Greek government did. I used to consult the Greek government at one point for cruising, and I was very proud of how they opened up fast and led the way. So 22, the year of recovery. 23 was the year of full recovery. So we fully recovered at that stage. We got back to where we were in 2019.
And even more?
No. It was about a full recovery. Now you hear explosive growth, you hear all these phrases, but compared to 50% occupancy, which we had before, of course it's explosive, because we were half full before, So we cannot forget that. 2024 was a year of growth. We started to grow again, and we completed the cycle. But the year of getting out of debt has yet to come for some cruise lines.
I see a lot of cruise ships also been put at the breaking yards also, yeah? The ship breaking yards. A lot of cruise ships. I think Costa, there was a video which was going viral. A lot of cruise ships were in the line and they were breaking the ships.
They were...
A lot of ships were at the, breaking yard, ship breaking yard. A lot of cruise ships.
Oh, there were...
Which line was that? 4 or 5 cruises in the line and they were at the breaking yard. I don't know which yard. Was it Alang or somewhere else?
No, I'm not sure of that story. I mean, I remember in 2020 we had to lay up the ships,
But don't you think that a lot
places.
of cruise ships were also scrapped during that period?
Yes, they were.
That's what,
yes. And in a sense, like I said before, when something bad happens, you can cry about it or you can try to turn it to something good, So one good thing happened is all the old tonnage was eliminated.
Yeah.
And scrapped mostly in Turkey, but also in India.
Yeah.
They scrapped ships, and so a lot of old tonnage that was environmentally unfriendly left.
That's also a good way
left
to look
service, which was a good thing.
Yeah.
And the shipbuilding still continued, which was so.
It's good. Yeah.
We still grew at a slower pace because we lost a lot of ships,
Yeah.
but we gained more than we lost. So in each year we were having 20 to 25 ships in those years. Now it's gone down to about 11 per year coming in to service. So we cleaned up, we cleansed the fleets of the world, which helps us on the IMO net zero 2050.
We'll come to that.
That's another story. But
True.
so good things did happen, but the cruise industry, the sanitization protocols on board a cruise ship are far superior than a hotel. So, and in most business environments, so the cruise ships are able to manage, because the chances of bacteria passing from one person to another on board a cruise ship on a micro community is a threat, but we were already efficient at stopping disease spreading or viruses spreading, and the sanitation protocols were advanced on a cruise ship, so we were more agile to adapt, and that showed the resilience. But the greatest agility was the financial aspect, because it's not like the business was moving in 2020. It was completely paused, and 21 was at 50% occupancy or low occupancy. Yeah. So it was very challenging, and some are still paying the debt.
Yeah.
So the year of financial recovery for many still has to come, but they have a plan. Mm-hmm. All the major cruise lines have a very concrete plan, and the passion and the love for cruising is back.
Yeah, true.
So we rode that storm, but it was a major storm, and there were casualties. Some cruise lines went under,
Yeah.
Cruise Maritime Voyages, for example, which is a big customer of ours. Bahamas Paradise Cruise Line. Lots of cruise lines went under. Well, a few went under during that period, but the others, Pullman Tour, for example, they went under. And it was a survival of the fittest.
Yeah. We can say that.
Some cruise lines were too big to fail.
Got it.
And they could recapitalize, but not without difficulty. All of them had difficulty. Yeah. Of course they did.
Do you remember any of the COVID incidents or accidents that you still feel that, it has made an impact, or any heart-touching story of the COVID days?
Well, I've got positive stories to tell about COVID, because my job was vice president of the cruise sector for Inchcape globally.
Yeah.
And so I was thinking about where's the money? So first thing, thank you to Inchcape for keeping us going.
Wow.
But I had to survive, and I didn't want just to get handouts from Inchcape. So I tried to find ways to help the cruise industry, but in parallel make some money to keep going.
Mm-hmm.
And we worked very hard on finding technical calls and layups, and repatriating guests and repatriating crew.
Yeah.
We did this all over the world, but particularly Dubai. When everywhere else was closed, Singapore was closed, the whole of India was closed, all the Indian Ocean, Africa closed, everywhere in the Gulf closed, Singapore closed, Dubai open. And the cruise lines would all call me, Grant, I need to get in.
Yeah.
I would speak to the head of DP World in Port Rashid. Look, I've got another ship. Not another one. Yeah, but we need to help them.
Yeah.
They've got full of passengers, full of crew, and we need to repatriate them. Please let another one in. And they would let them in. And we would repatriate crew and passengers in the thousands to get them home safely. And Dubai was a beacon of light during the COVID period. We did amazing. So when all that happened and everyone was repatriated and all the ships were laid up, we waited for the COVID story to get to an end.
Yes.
And then we started with restart. But the first thing to restart, what do you need? You need all the crew to be vaccinated.
Yeah.
And there was a big demand for vaccinating crew. And the crew mostly, for cruise ships, they mostly come from Philippines, India. And Indonesia. And the programs for vaccination in Indonesia and Philippines were very slow in particular. India also quite slow, although they had AstraZeneca, and I spoke with AstraZeneca, but they weren't prioritizing seafarers. So I went to the new head of DP World that had just taken over from Port Rashid. And the first time I met him, and I said, look, I need to vaccinate crew, and I need your help to convince the government to do a vaccination program. So we made a plan, and we wanted 10,000 vaccines that we would give free. But the logistics of it would not be free, obviously.
Yeah.
And I'm so proud to say that the Dubai Tourism and Economy and the Dubai Department of Health, DHA, they were amazing. They said, look, we have to wait till the population has been vaccinated at 75%.
Yeah.
And then we can look into it. And then we got the vaccines for crew once they'd hit that threshold. But fortunately, we were ahead of the curve globally.
Yeah, true.
So 75% was way ahead of the rest of the world.
Yes.
So I contacted the cruise lines. Okay, we can vaccinate your crew.
Come here, yeah.
So the World, your favorite ship, was in Tenerife, and it sailed here to Dubai. And we vaccinated all the crew.
Wow.
And the rest, they flew in.
Okay.
Saga, they flew all their crew here, and we vaccinated them all. We turned the QE2 into a vaccination hotel.
Which one? Queen Elizabeth,
QE2,
yeah? Oh, okay.
It became the quarantine, vaccination hotel. And the QE terminal, we had a vaccination center.
Yeah.
Which later, for more efficiency, we moved it to the World Trade Center area. And this was a huge success. So in the end, we got all the mega lines as well, and we were vaccinated. We used all the 10,000. And this helped a lot of cruise lines start up.
Yeah.
But it was also very good for Dubai.
Yeah.
Because how do you get to Dubai? You got to fly here.
Yeah.
In most cases, the World came, but no other ship came.
Yeah.
Then you need a visa, which is mostly a visit visa we used. So that was income for the country.
Yes.
And we had the transfers, meet and greet at the airport.
Yeah.
Then you vaccinated one Pfizer.
And the other one.
And then you stay in a hotel for 21 nights. And then you do the second Pfizer.
Right.
Yeah, so 21 nights, room nights for the countries.
Revenue.
Times 10,000, do the maths,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
It was a wonderful thing.
Yeah.
Some ships came, because we also had one ship dry dock for that. But it was an amazing organization that we did. And it changed the industry at the time. And people still talk about it today, I remember, because we were the first ones off the block. We were the first destination in the world to offer vaccines for seafarers. We were copied by Greece later. They did it, and that was a great initiative because you could do it. And Cyprus, also proud to say, Cyprus were a former home of mine. They did it. And the Cyprus government were very proactive on that. And also in Florida, eventually, they offered this as well. And then others copied for seafarers. But we were the first in Dubai in the world. So that's the most positive story that I can tell you.
No, definitely.
And
definitely.
it, you know, I didn't get any sleep during that period because there was so much work to coordinate it all and all these crew. And the crew were, you know, they were afraid when they were coming. You know, you could see it in their eyes. You know, so we would talk to them, we would calm them, and we also gave them a form of consent because I wanted every crew member to give their own consent for the vaccines.
I have a very, I would not call it a tragic story, but during COVID days, generally, you know, I am a social drinker. I used to drink socially. I have had a decent bar at home. But for some reason, Holmes, when COVID hit, I went into a depression mode in a way that I stopped drinking. I was like, what the hell is happening in the world?
Yeah.
People are dying because of this disease, you know. It's not, I mean, though, you know, luckily, God's grace, I had the job. A lot of people have lost job, right?
Right.
Being a pilot, I have a job. I have ships coming in, though I was putting on all the protective gear and everything. But I had a job. I could have enjoyed my evenings, right? No, I couldn't. From inside, I felt that the world is not in a good shape now. I cannot feel good about it, right? Also, there was one cruise ship. I forgot the name of the ship. They brought 1,400 crew from Miami to disembark in Goa because they were Goan nationality. I mean, Goan citizenship.
It was a carnival ship, was it?
I forgot the name.
Yeah, I think it was with us.
Yeah, I think you guys were the agent. I'm sure.
Yes.
So you guys brought 1,400 crew to disembark in Goa. I think this was the only thing done in the history of India where 1,400 crew came.
I remember it well because we had to go through all the protocols and. But we were doing it in Mauritius, we were doing it in India, all over the world. It was a major.
So I piloted that vessel, and Holmes, I mean, you know, when the pilot used to board the ship, we were generally greeted with, "Hi, good morning, sir," and, you know, stuff like that. This time I boarded the ship, people were just taking my bag and they were sanitizing the bag and they were putting the, you know, spray on me, checking my temperature. I was like, where the world is going? What is happening to this world? And the saddest part is, being a pilot, you berth the ship, you feel good about it, captain feels good about it, and you shake hand at the end of the job, right?
Yeah.
I could not shake hand with the captain. I was so disappointed. I mean, where are we going with this, you know? And I wrote an article about it, and the local newspaper also published that. Because this experience, I mean, it was telling that the world is not in a good shape at the moment.
Yeah. I mean, I had the same feeling, you know, but I felt blessed, though, to be in Dubai because what we experienced was minimal compared to most parts of the world. We were very honored to be here. And we had, 6 weeks max, you know, of this issue. And in a sense, again, in all my life, in the face of adversity, I've always learned to enjoy the moment.
Yeah.
So as bad as COVID was, you can't do anything about it. It's beyond you. It's bigger than you. So I used the opportunity to rest initially and spend more time with my family.
Yeah, that's all we were supposed to. You were
And
doing,
I,
right?
I actually enjoyed those days, and we got it. Thank God, I didn't really want a dog. My wife bought a dog, but I was so thankful for the dog. And I love
I'm
that
going
dog
through
now.
the same struggle at home, by the way.
Yes, but I had that dog. That dog was a godsend because I was allowed to take the dog for a walk. So I really did a lot of things. Like when I lived in Dubai initially, I never drove. I didn't bother because my license was in Cyprus, and they won't. You can't convert a Cypriot license. And I thought, I'll go Karim everywhere and metro. And I was actually quite happy with that life. But in COVID, with the taxis, I didn't want to do that anymore. So I took my test during COVID, and because I wanted to get a car, And so I changed a lot of things in my life that were all for the positive. I lost a lot of weight. I started walking long distances because you take something away from someone, you want it more,
Yeah, true.
And I wasn't even walking that much before, but then I started to
I
walk.
started doing yoga in COVID. This is something I learned,
I was doing COVID, and I was doing all the things they told you not to do. They told you to be afraid. I wasn't afraid, to be honest. I was not afraid at all. I knew my immune system would manage it. And they told you to stay indoors, be locked up. I needed to go out because I needed the vitamin D.
Vitamin D.
One of the best things to boost your immune system, vitamin D, and keep fit.
In India
and
during
keep healthy.
COVID, whoever has went to hospital, very limited chances to survive. There was the saying in India during COVID.
Partly because you were in hospital. Remember that if for any drug, 33% of the effectiveness of the drug is called the placebo effect. It works because you believe it works.
True.
And it works in reverse. So if you fear that you are sick and you're going to die, you had a much greater chance of that during COVID.
It's a very...
But the fear was part of it. So one thing I knew to do is be the opposite. I'm not going to be fearful. I'm not going to worry about it. I'm going to boost my immune system, and I'm going to trust my immune system. I didn't want to take the vaccine because I trusted my own immune system. But then later on to travel, I had to take it. So I did take it.
Yeah.
But I took the Sinopharm, which is a non-vaccine. It's a dead cell of the virus, which is not really. So I took that.
What is that? I don't know that.
Sinopharm, it came from China.
Okay.
A Chinese vaccine that was one of the initial ones that came out. But it's not mRNA because I didn't want that because that is a completely different way of working. And I personally felt that not enough studies have been done on it. The Sinopharm was the old-fashioned. You give them the dead cell of the virus and you catch a little bit of the problem and then your immune system learns to cope with it. That's the principle of it. So I took the old-fashioned Sinopharm vaccine and I knew nothing would happen to me and that I could still travel. And sometimes I would have to go to Qatar, for example, and Qatar would not accept Sinopharm unless you did an antibody test. So I was helping for the World Cup, preparing for the World Cup from 2016 all the way to the World Cup. So during the after period of COVID, to travel to Qatar, I had to get the Sinopharm plus the antibody. So I would do the antibodies, so I knew what my antibodies were. And at one point, I was the highest in Dubai.
Wow.
They said a good result is like 100. And the first time I was about 140.
Freaking hell.
And then I was 300, but I ended up at, I think it was 4,654. Yeah. And they said it's crazy, the number. And I
was
don't
it
know how
xenophone?
real that was, but they even told my colleagues that you should stay close to me. So I was like I was like
You
a
become
vaccine
the
in
vaccine.
myself. Yeah. But so I was monitoring that antibody level, and again, all those measures I did was almost a diametric opposite to what you were told.
Yeah.
Don't go out, be afraid, you know. And so people would be ordering food, delivery food that was fast food, not good for you. We were cooking. So we were doing all the, in my view, the sensible steps of boosting the immune system.
Boosting the immunity.
I looked at all my vitamin levels from A to Z, what I need to boost. I was doing tests on that as well. I was doing also medical tests to see where you could do it, because it was difficult at one time. And I think I look back at it as a tragic period it was for the world. Yeah. In my own small bubble, it's a period of enlightenment, you know, because I was so busy before I didn't have time to think, and COVID gave me time to think.
A lot of it.
Me rest and sleep, and I believe I'm younger because of COVID.
Could be.
So I have a lot of things to thank for COVID as well.
Good.
But again, you get these lessons in life, whether you want to have them or not. You don't have a choice in them. You can't always choose what life gives you, but you can choose how you respond to it.
True.
And my view is I had to respond in the right way, and not just listen to the fear-mongering that was going on and the panic. There will be a positive somewhere, and it was difficult to find it initially, but it was for me it was a revitalizing period. I completely changed during COVID.
Okay, Holmes, let's move to the next one. I've heard that post-pandemic there is a surge in young travelers, including the social media influencers, Gen Z, millennials. What do you think about that?
Yes, it's true. Gen Z, and they're very demanding, and they're more environmentally aware and more socially specific on what they want. Cruising, the bigger the ships, the harder it is to fill them. So you've got to appeal to all the generations.
True.
So if you take like the biggest ship in the world, 6,500 passengers, you have to be all encompassing. So
Queen Mary?
Queen's is 3,000. It'd be more
which
traditional.
is the biggest cruise ships in the world? Which is the biggest cruise ship?
Queen Mary is one of the biggest ships in terms, like its draft.
Length,
Its draft is 11. You have 11 meters. You know, it can't go anywhere. But when it comes to numbers of passengers, no, it's 3,000 something. You know, for the Queen Marys. Whereas they take Harmony of the Seas, for example.
Which one?
Harmony of the Seas.
Harmony of the Seas.
Caribbean, 6,500.
Oh.
And that's a mega ship.
That's a mega ship.
A super mega ship. You know, so it's like a super cruise ship, super mega. And if you have a ship of that, you know, that scale, you've got to appeal to all the generations. All the mega ships have to. So the bigger the ships, the more they embraced the different generations, and particularly the mega ships, because they had to. Whereas Discovery ships stayed traditional, stayed with the more mature guests. On luxury ships, it's still more mature. The average age, 60, 50 to 70. And Discovery, even older. And then the Expedition, that can have some young people, because it's adventure. But you have to have a lot of money to go on an expedition. So
again,
if you have young and with money, but you don't have to have that much money to go on a mega ship. So it's the mega ships with the all-encompassing mentality, and they're exciting parties, but they're also very environmentally friendly. And they have sustainability programs that are very well thought out on all the mega lines. And this appealed to Gen Z. And Gen Z were one of the targets post-COVID in particular, because some of the more mature guests were more hesitant to go back on board again. So you wanted to capture a new market.
Oh, okay.
And this is one of the reasons that, for embracing Gen Z.
So you're saying that a lot of cruise ships are doing campaigns, ad campaigns to bring Gen Z also, is it?
Yes. And that happened through social media.
Yeah, for sure.
Because the Gen Z are much more, but different types of social media. If you want Gen Z or Alpha, you have to go on TikTok, for example. You have to change. Look at Donald Trump. He learned the importance of
Podcasting,
TikTok.
yeah, for sure.
And it completely changed the vote for young people.
Correct.
Because he looked at that audience and changed. So the tactics had to change, and it was social media, but different social media. Facebook's or
Instagram,
Meta's for old people.
Yeah.
Now, not Instagram.
Matured
That's
people.
a bit more younger.
Matured people, yeah.
Like my son never wants to go on WhatsApp. That's too old, He goes on Snapchat.
How old is your son?
14.
Ah, okay. Yeah, I mean, Snapchat is something that I never understood, to be honest.
Well, it's very simple. You send a message and it disappears in front of you after you've seen it. Yeah.
Ah, okay.
The messages disappear.
And you keep sending a lot of photos also and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's why. They disappear and there's no history. So you can do what you want, And they think it through. And I mean, contrary to what a lot of people say about the young generation, I'm very optimistic. I've seen some very smart young people. And they challenge the historical norms.
Yes.
And many times they're right to challenge it. Why still do it the old way? But sometimes maybe not. So it's a balance.
Yeah.
The only terrible thing going back to COVID and Gen Z and the Generation Alpha, they had many years conversing with masks, and that affected the psychology of many of our younger friends. So, and schools, and they had this fear, and I think it was really bad what the media had done in the fear porn that had been pumped out during the COVID period, making people afraid. And some governments were guilty of that as well. And the fear was damaging to the health and damaging to the mind,
I mean, that's
people's mental health.
I would say that's a DNA of media companies. Like,
oh yes,
they have to make money through.
Absolutely nobody died last night. You don't get any sales out of that. But 10 people murdered. In cold blood.
True. Anyway, let's move to the next question.
Sure.
How do you see India as a cruise destination, since you have had many experiences in India?
Interesting. It would be the answer.
I like the word.
Incredible.
Not incredible, it's interesting.
No, I mean, first of all, there's huge potential in India. And I see India as a potential for a source market, even greater than a destination. Yeah. Just do the maths, 1.3 billion people. So let's say you can wipe out 400 million and will not have enough to buy. Yeah. So another 300 million maybe egging towards that, but they don't have enough either. Yeah. Then you've got only 600 million, which is more than the US. Now, from that 600 million, 300 million needs a microloan to go on a cruise, to be honest. A microloan or some sort of financial support to get on the loan. And maybe that's not easy to get now. So that leaves us with 300 million. But 300 million,
that's a big number. Anyways.
What's America? 340 million? And only 11, there are about 33 million people cruise. So if you've got a source market, let's half the 300 million, say you've got 150 million really can cruise. They can cruise tomorrow.
Yeah.
150 million is a huge market.
True.
So if we get the cruise buzz going in India, then that can work, worldwide. And then the future of cruising, and the source market of cruising could be Asia. Because from the 33 million, about half of that is North American at the moment. So we need Indians to cruise, and we need to get the bugs. So I helped from an advisory capacity, the first cruise line that opened domestically, which is Jalesh Cruises.
Jalesh Cruises, yeah.
I was there at the beginning.
Well. Yeah. Karnika was the name.
Karnika, yes. We were the agents, and we were helping, and I was also doing the shore excursions, the ground handling. And, operationally, it was a success, but the passenger numbers were not high enough to sustain it. And there was a lot of learning curves internally with Jalesh. And they've gone ahead now with Cordelia. Which is working.
Yeah.
It's working, and now they've got a plan for more ships.
Okay.
And the CEO Jürgen Bailon, he knows what he's doing. He's a great man, and I think that this will succeed, and others will enter that market.
Follow, yeah.
And as a destination for international cruising, it's complex.
Really?
Yes, it's the port costs themselves are okay, but you have this tax on consumables, which is very high. It's a huge barrier to cruising, and by the time you've paid all of that, and it's a self-assessment, it's difficult for cruise lines to break even. Yeah, even break even
in Indian coasts.
When they call it Indian coast, well, Indian coastal cruising, but even international cruising, difficult to break even. But domestic cruising, and that's another thing. There's a huge set of things you have to do to convert the ship from international to domestic cruising, which involves customs, and there's a lot of cost that's invoked by that. And the casino tax, for example, is 28%, and then you've got all these taxes and costs that makes it very, very difficult. And it's not just the tax and the costs themselves, it's the complexity of managing it. That itself is costly. So I had made suggestions on the high-level advisory committee, which I'm on, to simplify it. Going back to my Einstein thoughts, simple to complicate, complicated to simplify. So let's simplify, and let's just put one tax for all consumables and customs, just one tax per passenger. And then the cruise lines know what that is, and then they can factor it into the cost of the ticket.
Yeah. Makes sense.
But that's not been done and not been listened to, and the Customs Authority and Finance Ministry have gone ahead with these taxes, and they still insisting on these conversion taxes and the tax on consumables, which makes it really, really difficult for cruise lines to operate. And the longer that stays, I worry how we can get Indian cruising off the ground, because the amount of passengers we're getting on board ships is minute. There's one Cordelia ship.
True.
Resort World Cruises were going in there, but they pulled out because of the tax. It's difficult to manage.
Difficult to survive. Yeah.
And they really wanted to go because they see the wonderful potential of India. Yeah. And India and the ports are improving. We have a new cruise terminal in Mumbai, which is improving, but on the other side, they're charging much more money for that. So again, it's like another tax. Yeah. So all these are adding up and becomes very difficult. Goa is building a cruise terminal, which is very encouraging. And they have a domestic and an international terminal. We're seeing Vizag has a new terminal.
Vizag, yeah.
So, these things are happening. Infrastructural changes are positive. But if we're paying all these taxes, how can you pay also for increase of cost in the terminal? So it's a fallacy of statistics. It's very difficult to operate a cruise because you can't charge that much for cruising in India. So I think that is what's holding India back, and I'm worried about the future of that. I do think it will sort itself out in time, but federal intervention is required. But with the finance ministry, because that's the problem. I believe the ports have a very rationalised price at the moment, although the terminal price is high.
Yeah.
You know, so
You heard about this cruise ship called Angria? I don't know whether you were the agents of Angria in Goa or not.
no, I know
it was a
I know
small
the
cruise ship.
Yes, I know this.
They bought it from Japan,
Yes,
and they were running between Mumbai and Goa.
yes.
This was the first cruise ship before Jalesh.
Yes, I was aware it was a casino.
Yeah, it's a small
operation.
one,
Yes,
a small
yes.
cruise ship from Japan.
Yes,
They could survive.
no. And that's a small one. Imagine a large one, and you've got to fill it each week. You know, because as I told you, it works at $150 a day. I mean, Jalesh, Cordelia, it was
That's
in the discovery sector.
Yeah.
So it's price sensitive.
Yeah.
And it's not so easy. And the government needs to do more to promote. But the good thing is, positively, the infrastructure of India is getting
improving.
better.
Is improving.
Look at Mumbai. Look at the new coastal road.
Yeah.
Look at all the different things that are happening
Yeah.
in India. I went back to Mumbai recently. I was there in January, and it took me 45 minutes to get from the airport to Marine Drive, which was 2 hours at one point.
Yeah, true. It has reduced.
45 minutes. I was shocked. And we were under a tunnel, and
Correct.
you know, and we had this beautiful coastal road going round. So
Worldly Sea Link. Yeah.
and the terminal's going to be great
Yeah.
in Mumbai. We need to rationalise the pricing a little bit, but I think that will be fine. But these taxes, GST, and also they charge GST on the ticket sales as well. So it's on every corner you're paying this GST, on the fuel for consumption, every Coca-Cola, even when it's sailing in international waters, it's considered coastal cruising. So
so you're talking about the international cruises sailing in Indian coast also paying those taxes?
yes, they still pay the tax on consumables. And it's huge, you know, and even when they're sailing in international waters, it's not considered because you're going from one Indian port to the other. So you have to pay. Self-declaration, but as I said, simplify it, make one rational charge per guest, let the cruise lines factor that into the ticket price, and it might work. But there's a limit to how much the guests will pay for a cruise.
True.
So... And that limit is, you know, the balance is not there. The cost of operation to do what
So
they'll pay
you're
for
saying this is
cruise.
only in India, not in the other countries around the world?
There's only 2 countries in the world that do tax on consumables, to my knowledge, and that's Brazil and India.
That's it.
Yeah, and Brazil the cruising would have exploded if they didn't have that. But it's a lot less complex than India. It's complex, but even less than India, because in India it's very complex to do the whole thing. They're going to digitalize it, which is a good thing. But you know, some cruise lines are hiring people just to calculate it.
Oh my God!
You know, if to do it properly. And cruise lines are they're by the book. You know, they want to do it properly.
True.
But it's not possible to. After all, cruising is a business, right? And if you want to do the business, you have to generate an income of some sort.
True.
Many cruise ships already come to the port at break even or a loss, and then they rely on making the money on board to make the profit. But if you're making the money on board and you're paying the tax on consumables as well, there's no way to make a profit. So they will try to, if you put India on a world cruise, it will work out because you make money on the rest, but not that bit. But regular cruising, very difficult.
Very difficult.
My hat's off to Cordelia for keeping it going.
Surviving.
Yeah, they're doing some job, and they're managing to meet ends. And I have great hope, because if we can change these taxes and get some exemptions or simplify, then and rationalize, we can make a huge boom of cruising in India. And the thing about cruising, it will bring more business to India.
For sure.
Because if when an international ship goes to a port, 80% of the guests on board,
They go out, yeah.
no, 80% only buy this cruise to sample destinations they aim to return to for a land-based vacation.
True. They like it so much, yeah.
So if the experience is good,
Correct.
they will come back. 50% of them fully intend to come back. So it's like a world travel market.
True.
Every time we have a cruise ship call.
True.
And you could generate, it'd be a catalyst for generating all this tourism in the future to the destination. So if India understood how to capitalize on cruising, it would, highly benefit many other tourism streams of business, from adventure to discovery to medical tourism to. And it would also help real estate if you were allowed to buy real estate. It could help buying a business in India, doing business in India, because it's all about
opportunity
awareness.
is huge. Yeah.
So
you just have to realize,
moment we're losing because the amount of calls you have is insignificant to what it should be.
Correct.
And that's a shame.
Yeah.
That's a real shame to see.
I hope this podcast reaches to right people in government.
May it go viral in India,
maybe
please.
they should
And I will be the first, because I love India.
Yeah.
And I do think India is incredible, by the way, in more ways than one. And I love India, and I've lived in India. Yeah. So I hope that the right people here, because this is it's
very important.
Such potential that is completely untapped.
Yeah.
And if you have a knife in your arm, you can take away the bleeding. You can stop the pain, but you still have a knife in your arm. And the knife in your arm here is the taxes that's applied by the Ministry of Finance. It's too much. It's inoperable. It's unsustainable. And it has to change if we want cruising to flourish.
To flourish in India.
So
yeah.
I hope it
does.
gets sorted.
So, when I heard about Inchcape and you work with Inchcape, it's a very fascinating thing for me to interview you, and you're from Inchcape, because I've been listening to Inchcape since my cadetship days. It's I would say, as a sailing career, it's a different path, but as a agency, it's a very different world out there, right? So why don't you tell us more about Inchcape and how is it formed, if you have some knowledge about this?
Yes, of course. Well, we were established as a company in India.
Oh.
It all goes back to India, always.
Wow.
Yeah. Even some of my roots are India.
Okay.
And it established in India in 1847 in Calcutta. And we're the oldest port agency in the world.
Okay.
By some margin. And we're also the largest port. We've got the largest port agency network in the world. And agency, you deal with everything in port operations: pilots, tugs, cranes, cherry pickers. You deal with immigration, customs,
everything.
Security, port authorities. And the agent is the glue that puts everything together.
Okay.
We do the magic. It's super glue in many cases.
Sure.
And a lot of people don't realize the full extent to what an agent does. We're even involved in visas and, transfers to the airport, crew, taking care of the crew. And some agents diversify, like we do, in ground handling and also port operations. And I'm looking after 850 ports where we have cruise ship operations. And that's with our own offices around the world, which we have just under 70 countries. And we have own offices there, but we have business partners, and many of them now are signing all over the world exclusive business partners to fortify the network for cruising.
So when you say exclusive, they only work with Inchcape.
Yes, for cruise.
For cruise.
Because I've signed it in the cruise sector. So we only work with them in that country, they only work with us.
So the roots were Indian, Inchcape, and you are one of the largest agencies in the world.
No, the largest.
The largest agency in the world. And anything else you want to talk about Inchcape? Yeah.
Yes, so because we have such a legacy as a company, and 1847, when you work for Inchcape, I didn't see myself lasting there for that long, but it's been 10 years now. And I realize that now I'm just the custodian of time. I'm one of the custodians of Inchcape to keep the name of the company going. And I've got my own sector.
Very interesting.
Being cruise and super yachts. And that's how I see it. I see it as a custodian. And I love my job. You know, I have many other possibilities in my life, but I love what I do at Inchcape. And it's a decent company. It's an honorable company, you know, and they do take care of the people. And it's filled with opportunity, you know. And an agent is connected to so many things.
True.
And it's such a global nature of the job that I love, because every single port almost that 850, I know them all.
Yeah.
And
True.
that's a unique synergy that I have with the job, you know, that I happen to have been to most of those ports or been to most of those countries, you know, and we have offices in those countries, and each country has their own culture and way of working. And when you know how that is, you can get by easier, you know. So that's why I love the job, and I love the nature of what Inchcape does for shipping, because shipping is a critical function of life, you know, because everything in this room was shipped here, you know.
True.
These microphones, your laptop, your Apple Watch,
True.
you know, my jacket, this was shipped from India. So the table, every item is shipped, and we make the world go round. And we learned that in COVID, when you restricted those supply chains, look what happened. Food is shipped.
True.
Everything. We are the lifeline of everything. And what is important when you're moving around goods, what's the most complicated part is called the last mile.
The last mile.
The last mile. Getting the item on the ship and getting it off the ship. The rest is easy.
True.
The last mile is the most important thing. And that's what we do.
That's where you come, yeah.
We're the glue that puts that last mile together, because it doesn't always fit.
True.
It's like a gangway that doesn't quite fit, and we're the glue that just makes it work.
Extension ladder.
Yeah. Yeah, well, many times we have to make them, you know. If we know a ship's coming in and it doesn't work, we have to make a gangway, for example. We have to take the specifications, figure it out.
True.
So every problem you can have, we have to try to fix.
True.
And you can't automate an agent, you know, because it's so complex, you know. And
every ship has different issues, different problems. Yeah.
Yes, and that's our value. And we must try not to be reactive, to be proactive, to stop the thing happening before it happens. But sometimes you just cannot anticipate. And the power's not always in your control, so you need to respond.
True.
And, you know, so as an agent, that's what we do. And that's what makes it exciting and being involved, especially in the cruise industry, because you're not dealing with cargo.
Yeah,
only.
you're dealing with people.
You're dealing with people.
Yeah.
And
it's much more sensitive than dealing with cargo, because cargo is okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Super. And so... But we have a love for the job. You know, many of us have been in Inchcape many years, and we love what we do.
So Holmes, you're also the VP of Super Yacht. So what do you mean by super yachts? And because that's more glamorous and more luxurious than the cruise ships, right?
Well, yes and no. I mean, but people ask what's the difference between a super yacht and a cruise ship and how it's operated.
No, it's different, right?
No, the operation, that's the main difference. For example, a cruise ship is a set itinerary that's sold in a brochure in advance to passengers, to guests, we call them. Whereas a super yacht is two possibilities. It's owned, so it's for private use, all the guests of the owner.
Oh, yeah.
So it's operated differently. But it could be chartered.
Okay.
But then it's a full charter. It's sold individually. That's the difference.
It's a full
charter. Yeah. Many super yachts are the size of cruise ships.
Oh.
There are cruise ships smaller than some super yachts. You can get super yachts. I think the biggest at the moment is 188 meters, but soon will be 200 meters. And I know cruise ships of 110 meters.
Yep.
So, it's just differently operated. But when you look at a super yacht, it looks like a very large. I say a super yacht like more than mostly 50 meters, but at least super yachts are like more than 100 meters or 75 at least.
Yeah.
And they're big and they look like cruise ships.
True.
So they're operated differently, and that's the main thing about it. And you have a more intense operation because when you're dealing with multi-millionaires that own the super yachts and the entourages or the yacht management companies that have to manage that yacht, the demands from the owners and the guests, rightly so, are extreme in some cases. So they want everything now. And the planning cycle is a lot less. Everything is planned on a cruise ship. Everything.
So you're saying super yacht things can be flexible?
Yeah, but then the owner says, I want to go here tomorrow.
Yes.
And they will suddenly leave and you have to get a clearance. And then they want to go somewhere where you have to organize the entry. So it's very much as the owner feels like doing. They make their own itineraries up because they are free, because they own the yacht. They don't have to publicize it.
Yeah, true.
And so that demand becomes very critical
specific,
because it's just now that they want it. I want 50 bottles of champagne now. I need 50 Wagyu steaks now, and that demand for now can be challenging in some locations, So those destinations, especially in the Mediterranean, that learned how to deal with these demands for now in high luxury, because you're dealing with ultra high net worth people, they learned how to manage that. And that's same for agents.
Which is the largest or let's say biggest super yacht hub of the world?
Well, it's in south of France.
South of France?
Yeah, yes.
Not Montenegro?
And no. Montenegro is a hub,
It's a hub, but not for super yachts.
Yeah, for super yachts. It's usually, it's France, Spain, Italy, and Greece. Greece is a major hub as well. It depends on the year, Costa, the typical places, Saint-Tropez, Costa Smeralda, Barcelona, or at some point they were going to go there, and of course Croatia, Montenegro, Turkey. Yeah, but Mediterranean is, the ocean or the sea of super yachts, and for the summer of the northern hemisphere, and then in the winter they might go to Caribbean, they might come here to the Arabian Gulf, so they will come, but the Mediterranean is the king of the super yachts, and then that's spread between France, Italy, Spain, Croatia, Greece.
So, would you like to name
Monaco, of course? But I include that in France.
Italy, that's there.
South of France, Monaco, south of France, Saint-Tropez, and all that.
So tell us some interesting story from super yacht. Anything that you have in mind or anything that comes that you handle.
There's a lot of stories I can't speak of.
Okay. Anything
in
that you
public
can.
domains. I think the World Cup was my greatest moment and memory. We had 36 super yachts and cruise ships during the World Cup, the entire World Cup.
Where
period.
was it? Dubai?
In Qatar.
Qatar.
In Qatar, and I worked hard for the World Cup Supreme Committee. We had exclusivity in Doha, Old Doha Port, which is a super yacht destination now, wonderful destination. And we saw it was an old commercial port, not looking good, and all the traffic was moved to Hamad Port, and then they completely reconditioned it. But everything was going towards the World Cup. It had never been tested.
Yeah.
And we had to do that live. And, we had to find water piping, fresh water, barges. We had to fuel the yachts. We had to make fueling stations. It was very challenging. And it was all, 11th hour because they needed more accommodations and they needed more yachts. And we had 36 overall. So it
36
was incredible feat what we pulled off. And then, we had some celebrities there from Monaco. We had
You don't want to name them.
government officials I cannot mention.
Yeah.
And there was a great atmosphere. And it's the first time, because I always said to the industry that luxury cruise ships are similar to super yachts. And I could show you a cabin of a luxury cruise ship and a cabin of a super yacht. You won't know the difference.
Wow.
And in some cases, the cruise ships are better. So it was a great feeling for me in the World Cup when we could place luxury cruise ships next to super yachts.
Okay. Yeah, it's the same
Because
domain. Yeah.
everybody saw them as the same for the first time.
Correct.
But they were not the same. They were, we had beautiful Ponant ships. We had the Emerald cruisers there as well, the Azura, and next to super yachts. And you would not know and we took aerial plan views of it all, beautiful, stunning views.
Are there any videos online?
Yes, you'll be able to find.
Yeah,
yes,
I think
yes.
I should
I can get one. I have one.
Yeah, that'll be interesting to see.
What you need to do is go to the Old Doha Port
Old Doha Port.
website, and you will be able to see. Hopefully, still they have it. The World Cup scenario of all those ships in port. It was a magnificent view, and then on board a cruise ship, a luxury ship facing all the super yachts. Ponant was a French ship, and France were in the final. And I watched the final of the World Cup on a French ship.
Wow, lucky man, super
And
lucky.
they were losing, and then they scored right at the end.
Must be super party, yeah.
And
Grand.
it's the first time a Frenchman's ever bought me a pint. So there was a great joy, but of course Argentina won in the end.
Yeah.
And it was a great sadness on board. But those moments of up and down were incredible because we were watching it with the French crew.
Yeah.
So that was
you understand French a bit?
Yes, I do. Yes, I speak Spanish and Portuguese and Italian. So French is not so far removed, and I could understand everything. But they all speak English.
There's one thing we forgot to discuss about. There's a Inchcape logo, and there's a bird on the logo. So
yes,
what's the story of the bird?
There is a bird, and this symbolizes a species of a bird called the Arctic tern. And this bird has the longest migratory wingspan than any bird on the planet. So it literally flies from pole to pole.
Okay.
And it covers all the waters of Earth. So Inchcape covers all the ports of Earth.
What's the name of the bird you said?
Arctic Tern.
Arctic Tern.
Yeah, TERN. And, you can go to Anchorage, for example, in Alaska and see that bird, but then you can find it in the South Pole and it flies from both sides. So it covers the oceans of Earth, and we
Very
try to
detailed.
cover all the
Very
oceans of
detailed,
Earth.
yeah.
So
Whoever has thought of the logo is like
yes, it's genius. And there is an area of a rock of the north part of the British Isles, with a lighthouse on, and we call it Inchcape Lighthouse, and that is called Inchcape Rock.
Okay, so
And the
there is a
Arctic
lighthouse.
terns sometimes fly around
Wow.
that lighthouse, and we consider ourselves to be a lighthouse, because we
You're a
are
lighthouse
the
to
port
the
agents
ships, yes.
giving light to the
Yes,
ships to
yes.
come to safe harbor.
Yeah.
So it's a beautiful story, and it perfectly represents who we are,
Who you are, yeah.
and our DNA, that Arctic tern and the lighthouse.
Sometimes the logo holds so much of value
Yes.
that it's supposed to go viral. And I think that's what is happening with Inchcape. You guys are already viral and going to more places. So interesting. Okay, so Holmes, this very interesting question. Recently we had International Dubai Boat Show, right?
Yes.
Dubai International Boat Show.
Yes.
So you have been part of it. Why don't you share some knowledge of the boat show? Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's early days for the boat shows in Dubai, but I must say it was in the Dubai Harbour area, and it was impeccably organised, very well done. If you go to Monaco Boat Show, there's lots of queues. It costs a fortune to get in. The Dubai Boat Show is very reasonable to get in. You can see some super yachts, and it's very well organised. And every year it gets a little bit bigger, And they have a Nikki Beach party, which I really like that bar, and they have dancers, and so there's a lot of activity and a lot of business. And when you look at all the ultra high net worth people on earth, the Middle East has a high number,
For sure.
a high percentage. So we see, above all, a lot of the future and present and future coming super yacht owners will be from the Middle East. Not exclusively Dubai. It'd be Dubai. Abu Dhabi has a boat show as well. Qatar now has a boat show in Old Doha port. So you will see this more and more boat shows in the Arabian Gulf. And the reason for that is because one of the great source buyers of yachts are the ultra high net worth Arabs from the Middle East.
Sure.
And I see that trend getting greater. And people in the Mediterranean, big businesses, have understood that now. And there's a lot of focus because a lot of big companies have set up shop here in Dubai or Abu Dhabi.
GCC.
Like Phoenix Yachts and Camber and Nicholson, they've set up here. And Burgess has set up here.
Burgess is also here.
Yes, they're all here now. And it's really encouraging to see because, so I expect we'll see more and more of that moving forward.
Very interesting. I mean, Burgess, I've been following them for a while now, but I didn't know they are here already. Yeah?
In Dubai Harbour, you'll find Burgess. In Phoenix Yachts and Camber and Nicholson, for example, they're in Port Rashid.
Okay. With inflation rising and the fuel costs, how are the cruise companies optimizing operations to stay profitable?
Well, the big goal of all cruise lines is to improve operational efficiency and to focus on cost reduction. Cost reduction can be achieved through quality itinerary planning, by reducing the fuel consumption through low mileage itineraries. That's happening more and more now. And looking at the entire chain and seeing where cost efficiencies can be made. And in many cases, that's done very intelligently. And But we feel the pressure as agents always to look at ways to reduce the cost. And those ports that raise the cost too much, cruise lines will move. So ports are becoming aware of that, and there's competition sometimes amongst ports, especially to be the home port. Because there's a much more revenue is generated for a home port operation than a transit call. So I think there's in every element of the fabric of the operation, they're looking at cost efficiencies right through the chain, but doing it in a way that has the least impact on the guest experience, and then sometimes trying to improve the guest experience. Mm-hmm. So as an agent, we always focus on operational efficiency, cost reduction, but above all, guest experience.
Guest experience.
And those are the key elements of putting this thing together. And all the other members of the chain need to realize the same: the port authorities, the destinations themselves. And of course, if you have more volume, you can often reduce the cost. So that's another way, is centralizing your volume and looking at the cost. But ultimately, with inflation, prices sometimes have to go up. And those brands that are the most highly appreciated, they can put the price up more. Whereas the brands that, not so well appreciated will be more difficult.
Yeah, true.
I can give an example. If you look at the price of a cruise for Disney, it's huge. I still think they give value for money because for what they do, but it's quite a high price. But true. The brand is very highly valued.
True.
And there are many more examples. So it's important to have that reputation of the brand to keep the price up.
True.
Because ultimately, price increases will be necessary. But I think that hopefully we'll be in a world where inflation will be, they'll get inflation under control. Mm-hmm. I know this is a big focus of the Trump administration. So, and remember, 50% of the market is North America. Yeah. So the source market. So that's very key. What Trump is doing is going to equal another boom in cruising in the next 4 years.
Oh, you think so?
Yes. And hopefully that will lead to more new builds and more confidence in the market. Yeah, I see really positive things happening in the US. But in Europe, I call Europe a museum. I'm a little bit more worried, because the inflation, the cost of energy is crazy now in the UK and Europe, and the inflation can be quite high, and I don't see a plan to get out of it.
Yeah,
and the cost of the climate agenda is now getting very prohibitive for all businesses, just to manage the regulation apart from the taxes. So the European market, I worry moving forward what's going to happen. Hopefully we see that in most elections, voting towards the right is happening more and more.
I think the gas prices is just because Russia is creating issues. Maybe after the war is over between Ukraine and Russia, maybe the prices may go down of the gas. What do you think?
Yes, but they've made such an enemy of Russia, so I don't see that deal could be done anytime soon with Europe. I mean, you can see that there's now bilateral talks between US and Russia. I'm watching it daily, all the geopolitics. It affects my business, so I need to know what's going on.
It's going in a very different direction what anybody could have thought, yeah?
I mean, before the war, I had set up the new Russian cruise line on the ship Astoria Grande. I did the entire work, to support it. And then I had to give away the business because of sanctions. And this was devastating for us, And the war is a lot more complex than people think. And it's not straightforward. True. And I don't want to go into the weeds. No. I could, but I don't want to go into the weeds of it. But it's much more complex than people realize. And there's much more to it. And there's two sides. And, the propaganda on all sides is clouding the reality of what's happening on the ground. And my personal thoughts is, number one is life is the most important thing, and we should have peace. And we don't want loss of life. At all. Loss of life is not, there's no reason for it. Loss of life. Everything needs to be just, sorted out. We should be civilized.
True.
In our age. And there's no such thing as a military solution. I've never seen one. It always ends up more war, more death. True. War equals death, and there's no winners in war. Only the future generations or the future control of the narrative is the only winner.
True.
Because history is told by whoever wins.
Whoever wins.
But that's only a narrative. It's not necessarily reality.
True.
And when countries look at what happened to Germany after the Second World War, Germany became an economic powerhouse because the more pain you go through, you have a resurgence because you go back to tangible reality.
Yeah.
And you work hard and you plan properly. And those that won the war went into recession.
Yeah.
So there were no winners in war.
Yeah, true.
And we have to stop at all costs. And I think that it will stop now.
I think so.
And also it looks like the conflict in the Middle East is stopping. So I'm hopeful that the
world will be
Ukraine war will stop. But I hope that the belligerence of war stop.
Very true. As you rightly said, this is the age that we should not be fighting and killing. It's the age of innovation and maybe finding new ways of making new money.
Yeah.
So
we're just human beings.
True.
And they're all sides of human beings. And when you don't talk to the other side, however bad you think the other side is, or however bad they think you are, when you don't talk to them, that's a failure.
True.
On your side. You have to talk.
True.
And you have to engage, as painful as it is.
True.
And whatever you think your side says, you have to. And you have to stop the killing fields. There's no need for it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's move to innovation and technology in cruises. You heard about the Center of Cruise Excellence in Mumbai? I think this is established by Inchcape.
Yes, it's the Centre of Cruise Excellence is actually my project.
Oh, really?
Yes, we have set up a Centre of Cruise Excellence in Mumbai. In India, and I have a team there that's managing cruise itinerary management and support to small cruise lines all over the world. And we handle world cruises. So instead of having 45 agents or 50 agents around the world, you just have one. Instead of having thousands of emails backwards and forward, we use IT to have one page where we both look at one collaborative tool. So we are doing that with great success. And we also own World of Ports, where we logged more than 7,000 ports into a system. It has a paywall, and you enter the system. You see AIS tracking of all the ships. You can track a ship three months back to all its data points. You can see all the environmental information, technical information, specifications of the port. You can have a cost calculator, see how much it costs to go into the port. And Inchcape developed that.
Wow.
We spent several million. We have a large team in India doing that. That's.
Is it the same place, Center of Cruise Excellence?
No, it's connected to us, though. We are Center of Cruise Excellence, and we work alongside that team. We have separate tasks, but we utilize their skills and they utilize ours. And we have a lot of our intelligence for cruise inside the World of Ports.
Yeah, it mentioned that, it also offers weekly intelligence reports covering health, security, and travel updates.
Yes. And that's what we give to the cruise lines. So we used to have a newsletter where we gave that information, and very extensive reports, like 25-page reports each week. But now it's all going into World of
Digital,
Ports,
yeah.
to digitalize.
Are you
the
charging
process.
for this, or it's like
World of Ports is charged, not Centre Cruise Excellence.
World of Ports? Yeah,
Yes, the World of Ports.
this is what
it
an
has
app?
its own website.
Website,
And, it's Inchcape owned.
World of Ports.
And we're going to cruisify the World of Ports, put a cruise element to it. And it helps us, the World of Ports, for the cruise itinerary management, because you can click 2 ports and immediately find out the distance between them, how long it will take to sail there,
speed,
or whatever speed you use. Yeah, so we're using these tools to help the cruise lines,
Because
especially
you
the small
have all the
ones.
data of all the cruises across the
Of
world.
all the ports, yeah.
You just have to put into AI system and then that's it. Yeah.
Well, we haven't done the AI part
Okay.
yet. Yeah,
But I'm
so
sure it's
we're obviously looking
in the
at that.
pipeline, yeah, for sure.
And we're engaging with big entities.
In fact,
around
that
the
brings me
world.
to the next question. How is AI being used in cruise operations from booking to onboard experience?
Not on a major part yet.
Not yet.
Yeah, I think this is something in development. I think some cruise lines are ahead of the curve where others following. At the moment, most cruise tickets are sold from travel agents still. However, IT is really radically changing the entire process, from buying a ticket to getting inside your cabin. Yeah. And in particular, in the cruise terminal, it's making a big difference. The big companies like Royal Caribbean, Carnival, NCL, they've really nailed that. I embarked a ship in Miami 2 years ago, and it took me 7 minutes to get to the cabin.
Really? That's it?
Yeah, it was unbelievable.
From the port to your cabin, huh?
I entered the port, I was scanned twice, went through.
That's it.
The passport control was like a non-entity thing. And then onto the gangway, and I was escorted to the cabin. It was I mean, they knew I was coming, so...
Somebody was there at the gangway.
But I have observed as well. It's incredible.
Yeah.
Okay, can take more than 7 minutes, but mine took 7. But it could take longer, because even getting to the cabin, walking is almost 7 minutes.
As an Indian,
But
I'm surprised.
I don't know how... well, it could take you hours in India. Because you have the people checking the checker in India, so it takes a bit longer. But what they're doing in the US now is amazing, and the mega lines are leading here because they've got the passengers, the numbers, so they have to get
have to be fast. Yeah.
the digital experience right, and and they're always already playing with augmented reality, and. On some cruise lines, they had digital identification. So you have like a coin, which is digitally recognized by the guests, so by the crew, so they can see who you are.
Okay.
And, so if I'm walking towards a guest, a crew member, the crew member's near a machine, they can touch something, it immediately pops up who you are. So, good morning, Mr. Holmes.
Oh, interesting. So they know your name.
Oh, yeah.
That's a very nice idea.
That's
So
happening.
you need to have something and you can go to
cruise
anybody
lines.
and you know his name.
Yeah, and
Wow.
and remember the systems on board.
And when you say
digitalized.
somebody's name, it feels so connecting, They must be like, wow, this guy
Well,
knows
it's
my
good
name.
and bad,
Yeah.
right? Remember that mega ship is not a luxury, So 5-star cruising, you should never say someone's name.
What is that?
If you go to a 5-star hotel, you don't want anybody to know your name because you want to be anonymous.
Yeah,
right? True luxury, you need to be incognito. If anyone says my name when I go into a hotel, I don't go to that hotel again. Yeah. Good morning, Mr. Holmes. Don't tell everybody, Mr. Holmes from
in a way,
room
right.
number 714,
Freaking hell.
That's a scary thing, right?
Scary thing, yeah.
It should be private. Yeah. So I don't really want anybody to say my name. That for me is not a positive.
Correct. Yeah.
Sometimes even in Starbucks,
They call your name.
I have a funny thing in Starbucks, because life doesn't have to be difficult, to work it out. So my name is always difficult. They never catch it right. My first name Grant and second name Holmes, and it's a bit of a I don't know why, they always find it difficult and they always spell it wrong. And then I have to spell it for them. So when they ask my name, when they write it on the cup in Starbucks, they say, "What's your name?" I say, "Dan."
Okay.
And they never fail to spell that, D-A-N.
Dan.
Conversation over.
Over. True.
So one day I was in Starbucks in Mumbai at the airport. They have a Starbucks outside the international airport. And I'm queuing up, and then they go to me, "Can you have a name, please?" And I said, "Yeah, Dan." And, "Oh, yeah," writes Dan. And the guy behind me, Indian guy, said, "Oh, you're so lucky having a short name like Dan." He said, "I have to spell my name. It takes ages. I have to explain it." And I said, "Do you want to know the truth?" I said, "My name is not Dan." I said, "You could be Dan too." You just chose to give your real name. And that, A, that's not private.
Yeah.
And B, you spend 10 minutes trying to explain who you are.
Correct.
Even when, in Dubai, when you go into these security gated communities and you have to give your name and mobile, I just say Dan. Dan comes out. My alter ego.
Interesting. So, Holmes, you think the AI is started being used in your company, Inchcape, in a way or two? No? Not yet?
Well, we're in the middle of a giant transformation project, which is very positive. And, so no doubt AI will be looking into that. But, we're...
At the moment,
it's not being readily used. Yes, but however, me myself, I'm using AI a lot, to cross-reference things and help me improve what I'm doing. And I think a lot of people are in that space in the work, And there's so many opportunities. So from day one, especially being dyslexic,
You are?
Yeah, I'm dyslexic. So I am a very heavy AI user. And I would say also, I never write an email. I talk my emails through. Who needs to write an email in this day and age?
No.
I can't believe people are actually typing. I watch that with fascination. And I also, from the year 2000, I codified my own language. So when I type, I don't type. I just put a couple of letters and the whole sentence comes out. Because that coding I did since year 2000. So now I'm in AI world. It's another, it's wonderful.
True.
So I need to teach my AI the codes.
Yeah.
And then, you can get ahead of the game. Because
Maybe
I think it will save more time, but then you end up just working more. That's what happened with digitalization. We save time, but we're still stressed.
Yeah.
In fact, we're more stressed.
Yeah.
And anxiety levels are higher than ever. So, do you use your phone or does your phone use you? And that's the big question you have to ask. And that's the same with AI.
True.
Do you use AI or does AI use you? And, you can train AI. So, there's many AI platforms. I use each platform. I have a thing called AI differentiation. So I use a different AI platform for a different function.
Like how?
So one doesn't know about the other.
Okay. So are you saying
so
that
I have one for work, one for private, one for agendas, one for, then I know which one to go. One for pictures, one for videos. So I know which one to go for what.
Yeah, because it also is learning your habits and your stuff. So
but I don't want one to know all, right?
Yeah, you have to be careful. That makes a lot of sense, yeah.
So you have AI interdependence.
Yeah. Very important.
And I do that with browsers as well.
Okay.
Whatever I put into Google is just Google. Whatever I put into Microsoft Edge is just Microsoft. So Google doesn't get to find out what's in Microsoft.
You're contributing to all the big players and you're not giving information to just
But I'm
one
not
player.
giving no crossover information. Yes. And then if I'm buying anything, I don't use any of them. I use a really secure one on it because I don't let Microsoft know what I'm buying or Google. And I don't want, because they're more vulnerable.
Yeah.
And I think that's how you have to look at digitalization and AI. You have to
very careful. You
have to think really big picture because how this is working. Yeah, and then you have to bed it into your own ways of using things. But it also helps you because if I want to do something, I know immediately where to go.
True.
I don't have to think.
True.
There's an app for that, or there's a browser for that, and I'll use that.
Which all AI apps you use, if I may ask?
Uh,
It's going to be good for our
number
audience as
one,
well, yeah.
obviously, ChatGPT, because it is the best overall. I think it's the best. No LM is interesting. Flux for pictures is good. The Aria, which is on Opera.
What at Oprah? Huh?
Yeah, and I don't know if you do you use WhatsApp?
Yeah.
You have Meta.
Yeah.
On
Meta.
WhatsApp.
Yeah.
And so I use Meta only on WhatsApp, nowhere else. But
Okay.
but it's very helpful there. Yeah. There was I've been going through a whole host of them for Midjourney. And,
Yeah. You were experimented all of them. Yeah.
Yes. But I'm using different things for different functions.
I found ChatGPT paid version for pictures is really good.
Yes, but recently I'm not happy with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, because before you could put in your description, you get the picture.
True.
But now you get a code, not a picture.
Yeah, I
paid
mean, you
version.
get the
I don't want the
prompt.
code.
Yeah, you get the prompt.
I get, but I don't want that. I want the picture, because then that takes me longer because then I have to take that out, put it in somewhere else, generate that, and now I've not saved any time at all. Well, so now I go to other ones for pictures. And another one if you use Canva.
Canva is evergreen. I've been using Canva for a while now.
You can use Magic or something it's called, and you go in there just for quick pictures. You need that's a good one. It gives you. I like it the way it gives you options straight away, 3 options, and you can just choose and go. So for simple ones, it's not very clever, but for simple ones, that's really good.
Cruise ships are essentially floating cities, right? How do you ensure seamless digital connectivity for both passengers and the crew?
Well, that's very easy. Starlink. Today, that is the future, and the speed of the bandwidth is getting better. In my days of cruising, you had to go to the radio officer, and he could receive fax messages 3 times a day, only 3 times a day. And then he could receive emails only a few times a day.
MOs Connect
And then we had spotted, coverage, which was not very good. We used to use satellite companies like Inmarsat.
Inmarsat
doing it, but it was really slow and sketchy. And to have it for all the passengers was not easy. So its internal systems were internal. But once, we went into the Inmarsat got better, and now many cruise ships are moving to Starlink, and it's really good.
So there is no competitor to Starlink at the moment.
Well, there is. There's still Inmarsat and other, but really it's not a comparison. Because Starlink is dominating, and as they do in many countries. Look at the wars. When in a war zone, when all the electricity is off, you still have Starlink. So what Elon Musk has done with that is incredible, and they have so many satellites in the sky, so much coverage. In the middle of nowhere, you have a really fast Wi-Fi. So. And I honestly believe that this is going to radically change the world, because this year in June, I understand that the Tesla mobile phone will come out.
Really?
And that will be connected to Starlink. And then you won't need a mobile carrier anymore.
Wow. And then your car is also connected to your phone.
And your car will be connected. You'll be able to self-drive your car from your mobile.
Freaking hell.
So this is radically changing. Now, cruise ships, we're far away from that. Yeah.
True.
But Starlink is changing cruise. So how are we going to do it in the future? It's going to be Starlink at the moment until there's another competitor, which I'm sure there will be.
Yeah.
So it's improving and it's getting better. And I can go on a ship as a working nomad, and I can do a full day's work on a cruise ship now, whereas that never you could even think about that in the past. I used to think I'd travel the world and write one of my books.
Wow.
But now I can work.
You
I can be a working nomad and no problem. I went on a cruise with Resort World Cruises just to Oman for 3 days, and I was very busy, but I had work to do in Oman, so I used it like a lift.
Yeah.
Did my meetings in Kasab and in Muscat,
Okay.
because I consult the government of Oman. But I was worried about in between how I'm going to connect, how I'm going to work.
Yeah.
No problem.
Wow.
I did conference calls on Teams with the normal line that they had. So it's getting advanced, and I really think the interconnectivity is something very encouraging now. And I would also say that cruise ships, in terms of the numbers, United Nations, I think they classify a town as 6,000 people.
Yeah.
So we are a town floating, not quite a city yet, We're not 50,000, but we're in at 6,500, and we are a floating town of people, coming to. I mean, I've been to many destinations when there's been more people on the ship than the destination. And that's quite bizarre if you think about it. So, but the world is getting more interconnected. And the future will be satellite.
Yeah, for sure.
And also the EMFs emitted from mobile phones are quite high, and we don't really know what damage they will do long term.
True.
So I can't wait to get my first Tesla phone.
Wow. That's a very good idea.
I'm going to invest in that because the Starlink angle is really something we never thought. You can go anywhere in the world with the same contract. Now roaming globally has become a lot easier, and the costs are not, so astronomical as they used to be. So
let's move to the next one.
Sure.
How have marketing strategies for cruise ships changed with the rise of social media influencers and digital content?
Well, we touched on that a little bit previously, but it's radical what's happened, because the website itself is promoted through the social media. The social media is the means to generate interest, and so it's extremely powerful, the medium of social media. So I would say that it's radically changed, and it's also helped cruise lines sell directly. Because in the past, they would have to go for an agent, and only like 2015 to 2018, almost 90% of cruises were sold from agents, but that's changing now. And direct cruising and simplification through digitalization means you can buy direct. And people have been on more cruises, so they're experienced, they know how to select. And it's all promoted through the social media. So social media has had a radical change, and it's also influencing. People have groups, in Facebook and Twitter about cruises, and they share information. There is a website called Cruise Critic that dominated that, but it's been taken over now by social media, because social media is, and these groups are interconnecting. But me, myself, I'm the opposite. I've completely unplugged. I don't participate in any social media whatsoever. So I only LinkedIn because I have to for my work reasons. But other than that, I remember 18 million followers at one point when I was young. I had 36 websites pre-Inchcape days. And I just one day completely turned off everything, I had enough of that.
18 million views,
I remember looking at Rihanna. She had 80 million at the time, and thinking, how can I get to Rihanna's level, So, but all these, I created this web of websites and blogs that all interconnected and really generated a lot of traffic. But at the end of the day, it's just noise, and I would rather move to quality and focus, on, and it stopped me being a visionary and a leader, because you're too wrapped up in the day-to-day of the social media.
True.
Because human beings are four-dimensional, and one dimension is the emotion. And the highest manifestation of emotional intelligence is passion. Passion for your job, passion for your love, passion for your life. And the opposite of passion is called the social mirror.
Wow.
And what that means is you're not really passionate. You just want to reflect that you're passionate. Now, I wrote about that before social media. Now you have social media. The social mirror is being expanded and exaggerated beyond proportion.
True.
And people are living the social mirror in their day-to-day lives, and that means they're not living at all. So I think it's important, to unplug and get back to being a human.
Let's move to the next one. What lessons can cruise companies learn from other industries such as aviation and hospitality?
Well, I like to think that the cruise leads the way.
Okay.
We were the fastest growing segment of tourism all the way up to COVID.
Yeah.
After COVID, it was devastating for us. But so in terms of hospitality, as I told you before, the power of people, you realize the difference that people can make when you're at sea in the middle of nowhere, where as opposed to a hotel on the land. So we realized that managing such high numbers of people in micro communities mean you have to have the best people working for you, and hospitality needs to be number one.
True.
And the only way to grow our business was repeat business. So we mastered it. So I think we lead the way in many respects. But there are interesting trends in hotels, boutique hotels, for example, for luxury lines to learn from. And many of the luxury brands like Ritz-Carlton, Four Seasons are now having their own ships. Mm-hmm. And Four Seasons coming out soon. And that's going to be the king of luxury. Wow. So there is a lot to learn in that luxury segment. But when you think about the cruise ships, they're bigger than hotels. Mm-hmm. There's no hotel with 6,500 passengers. For sure. You have to go to Las Vegas to see the really big hotels. And there, I think the cruise lines initially learned something. From airlines, yes, we learn a little bit by the processes in airports, and you apply those processes to cruise terminals. And I actually did the process myself. I learned from the airline. So only this year we were doing the ground handling for Resort World Cruises in Cruise Terminal 2. And we had, for Indian guests, you have to have a multi-entry visa to go on a cruise because you're departing UAE and coming back again.
Yeah.
And we had to check every visa. And we did it at the desks, at the check-in desks. But that meant we weren't filtering it. So what do they do in Dubai airport? They have a check before you check in. If you're going to the US, they check your visa and they ask you some questions. Right? And I thought, that's a good idea. And we used to have one or two people who used to get through the net, and then, and then we find out they don't have a multi-entry and they're on board.
Yeah.
So they have to apply for another single entry, and it was not great.
Yeah.
So I wanted to stamp that out, but it's very complex when you've got 2,000 people checking in.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we introduced that check before you checked in, and I never had one person go through the net from that day on. And so I have to thank the airports for that. So we do look at the processes. And how, because they're more experienced than us. True. They have far greater traffic than us overall, and people movement. Look at the millions of people going through airports, especially DXB. True. So I learned in that way from the airports, and I have to thank them for that.
So what exactly is the process to go to US? You first go to one gate?
No. You before the check-in, you find out your check-in area. Then they put the railings over that area to stop you getting into the check-in.
Okay.
And they filter it through one desk Yeah.
So they ask whether you have
And that desk, they check your passport that you have a visa, and which type of visa do you have, and you have to show the passport and prove it. And then they ask you questions. Why are you traveling to the US? The normal questions that the US authorities want you to ask.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's the US that came up with this. And then when they are satisfied with that, they put a little sticker to show that you've been checked on the passport. And then you go to the actual check-in.
Yeah.
So that was the process.
that's
they have in
fast
Dubai.
process. Okay.
It was in Dubai I saw, but I've seen it in other places in the world. Okay. So it's not unique to Dubai. We do it particularly well.
Yeah. So
also in Canada, for Canadian crew, you do, and Israel. They do it for Israel also.
So basically, you have implemented this process for checking in of the crew
in the
ports,
in the cruise terminal 2 for to stop, because the large majority of cruise passengers going on board Resort World 1 were Indian.
Yeah.
And they needed double entry.
True.
And so, but we had multiple nationalities coming through, so we had to check everyone, and everyone was a different
Indians
scenario.
were like in this lane and to check.
And if you've got 70 staff, how do you communicate that to 70 that your chances of error are greater? But if you filter it just to 2 entry points, because we had 2 check-in areas.
Yeah.
2 entry points, then the chances of
you
failure are
filter
minimal.
the entry points. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So, and then you have a second check at the desk as well. So this worked a treat, and that's just one process, for example, that we picked up. So I think it's very important for people in the cruise industry to watch the airports. Traditionally, I do 140 flights a year, so I'm constantly watching the airports, what they're doing, how they function, looking at every detail. Is there too many checks?
Implement in the cruise.
And then applying those to the terminals really helped me. Mm-hmm. And then from hotels, it's more about the trends. The trends are often driven by people, and we learn from those trends and apply them on board. But we're also trendsetters ourselves.
Let's move to the next one. What is the biggest growth market for cruises right now? Are we seeing a shift towards Asian and Middle East markets?
We're seeing encouraging signs for that. There was great hope for China, but COVID killed that. Sure. And there were lots of American setups in China which didn't work out. And these poor American lines lost a lot of money. Now China is doing their own thing, and I think that's the right way forward. So cruise lines like Adora Cruises and Shanghai Blue Dream, they're doing their own thing, and we're agents for them in Japan, especially Adora, and they know their own market, and I believe those markets will now grow rapidly, but in-house, not with an American style, with their own style. Yeah. And the Shanghai Maritime Institute is the driver of all cruising from China, much of the cruising. And they wrote a green book of cruising. You can get that green book. I've got a copy. They gave me a copy. I was invited to see the Shanghai Maritime
What is
Institute.
this a book about?
About cruising in China.
In China?
How it evolved and what the protocols are and how they work. It's very interesting. And so they're building their own way forward. Innovating that's good for the Chinese people, So I think this is the right way to go for China. So China's been through this correction, and it was cut during COVID.
True.
It was really dramatic. But now it's going to have a life of its own, and it's going to happen organically in China, and that's the right way. So I'm optimistic. And then I see countries like Indonesia growing in the future. Singapore is booming.
True.
And Malaysia is, Port Klang, Penang, Langkawi doing really well. So I see a lot of optimism, but it's not quite happened yet. It's coming. Okay. Arabian Gulf, yes, we hit 1 million passengers in Dubai in 2019.
Wow.
But COVID again affected, and then we had the Red Sea crisis, where they couldn't come through the Suez Canal They have to come 3 weeks
South of
around
South
Africa,
Africa.
and 3 weeks back. So we lost a lot of calls this year.
So, Holmes, we are about to end the session. There are a couple of questions for young entrepreneurs or young people who would like to join maritime world as a leader. So, what advice would you give to them if they want to join as a maritime professional or in the cruise industry?
Well, I built 250 courses to train people that wanted to join the cruise industry. So I've had a lot of impact with.
Do you have some
young people.
online material of that so that I can put the link so people?
It was all custom made for each cruise line.
Okay.
So one thing I used to say at the beginning of the course to all of them is that 20 years from now, you will not be disappointed by the things that you did. You will be disappointed by the things you didn't do.
Correct.
So take away the bow lines, sail your ship, and don't look back.
Don't look back.
Go for it. Just say yes and enjoy your life. And I would advise anybody who's not sure what they want to do and they want to make a little bit of money and they want to see the world, but they're prepared to work hard, go and have an experience on a cruise ship. Go and work on a cruise ship because you will learn the essence of teamwork. You will learn difficulty because it's not so easy. And you will learn discipline. You will learn how to work 7 days a week.
True.
Minimum 11, 12 hours per day according to MLC rules.
True.
But in my day, I was working 16 hours every day, no days off. But I loved it.
True.
You will learn about passion and working in a closed community. You will see what people are capable of. And if you can make it on a cruise ship, it's like New York, you can make it anywhere.
Oh.
And I believe if you can make it on board a cruise ship and go up the ranks and make a success of it, you can make a success on land as well. So I often, like my own son, I'll be happy if he did 1 or 2 contracts on board because the discipline that he would learn, the passion that he would feel, the teamwork he would gain, the leadership knowledge he would draw from those leaders on board, I think will be invaluable for the rest of his life.
For sure.
I only actually worked on board for 2 years myself, but those 2 years were precious, and I don't think I hardly slept in those 2 years.
Sure. You know the industry, right? Okay. Also, the cruise industry is often seen as glamorous, but what are the misconceptions about working in this sector?
Yeah, I'll see the world and sailing and parties. It's not like that. It's hard work. You share a cabin. You feel sometimes homesick. You miss your house. You miss having a day off. Most people working at sea don't have any day off. You have to only learn the word liberty. You know that in the past, sailors working at sea were press ganged to work at sea. They were caught up in bars and things. They were put on board as slaves.
Yeah.
And they worked as slaves. And their liberty was when they went to port.
True.
Because liberty means free time in port.
Yeah.
And that's why you have the Statue of Liberty.
Oh, okay.
Because it was welcoming the sailors and the immigrants to New York. And that's the time they had free, you know. So today, you don't work as slaves on board, but you work very hard, you know, and it's minimum 12 hours a day, no days off. And sometimes if you're on a cargo ship, you feel very lonely. Mm-hmm. You can feel homesick. You can feel seasick. Mental health is something you have to take care of, and you need to plan for that in advance.
True.
You need to be mentally prepared before you go on board. You need to be physically prepared. You need to be healthy before you go on board, and you have to have a plan. And you have to learn discipline. That's what life on board teaches you.
True.
You know, even when you're exhausted, you know, when you're at sea, you have to compensate for the movement of the ship. There's a part of your brain called the cerebellum, which which organizes your balance.
True.
And that's what makes you feel seasick. But that part also makes you feel tired because you're constantly compensating.
True.
And that's why some people come off a long contract and they have land sickness. And they can come off like a zombie, you know. And I certainly did after my contract. And that's because of that cerebellum and that movement. So you have to be psychologically prepared and emotionally prepared and physically prepared before you go on board, and ultimately spiritually prepared.
Yeah, for sure.
And but what you will learn will overcompensate for that.
Overcompensate, for sure.
But this is not
It's not
a
easy.
holiday.
Yeah, it's
And
not easy.
You have to know.
I call shipping and sailing a fifth dimension of life.
Absolutely.
It's if you don't experience it, you don't know how it is, you know.
No. But there's nothing better than when you work on board is to have a walk on the deck every night, get the salt air inside you.
Correct.
And see the sea, see how minuscule your ship is to the earth. To look at the stars in the sky and think, wow.
That is true.
Every day, and then meditate and breathe 36 times through your nose and 36 times out through your mouth when you're on the deck. That's what I used to do every day. And that kept me alive in life, you know. It's a wonderful, and I miss that today. And I sleep better on board than I do on the land, still today.
You need a hydro bed.
If I go too far inland, I get a nosebleed, you know.
Oh, okay.
Still today, so.
Okay, Holmes, what's one piece of career advice you wish you had received earlier in your journey of life?
Well, that's not really the best question for me because I always did everything I wasn't supposed to do. And as I said earlier in my life, I don't want ships, and then I ended up doing more ships than my father. And I think at the end of the day, what I did was the opposite of what people should have done. And I'm really glad I did it. I said yes to things, and I embraced life, and you know, and some things I said yes to, it was crazy, you know, but I did them, and it's like there was some sort of synchronicity going on that took me to the right place at the right time. So I think that you need to listen to your spirit.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes
Intuition
when I didn't
important,
and I took a career path, it was a wrong move.
Yeah.
Listen to your spirit, listen to your soul, listen to what you feel inside, listen to yourself.
You think this monk experience has redefined or maybe recalibrated your brain? Yeah?
Completely. And that's why I said yes to everything. Because I get fascinated by everything around me, you know, and there's a big picture. So everything I do with my full heart, my full passion.
Potential,
And there's no halfway for me. And so I could not imagine doing a day-to-day job anytime, at any point in my life from the monk experience. You know? But even before then, I struggled. But the monk experience just allowed me just to say yes.
Wow.
You know? And so luckily I got the right advice from the monks.
Oh, for sure. Okay, finally, any last thoughts or messages for aspiring maritime professional and industry leaders?
Well, I would like to just break down. I actually devised a course on leadership myself, which doesn't exist anywhere. And I called it quantum leadership because human beings are four-dimensional. You have IQ, EQ, PQ, SQ, mental intelligence, emotional intelligence, physical intelligence, and spiritual intelligence. And the highest manifestation of mental intelligence is vision. So every leader has to have a vision. And you can look at any company, any individual. If I want to find a visionary, a CEO for the future, I'll just listen to them. Do they talk about vision? And what's the opposite of vision? Victim. They talk about the things around them. They blame them almost. Or they complain about them. Or they have, if only but. They become victim. The moment you say that, you're a victim.
Yeah.
So in life, you have a choice mentally, vision or victim. You choose
You choose.
which path you want to go. And then secondly is the emotional intelligence. The highest manifestation is passion. Passion for your job, passion for your life. And the opposite, as I told you earlier, is the social mirror.
Oh, yeah.
To say something, I believe in the environment, when you don't really.
True.
It's not that you're not against the environment, you're just not that passionate about it, but you fake it to look good and reflect that. So do what you're passionate about, and that's the only way you'll be successful.
True.
And then you have physical intelligence. The highest manifestation of physical is discipline, which you learn on board. And the opposite of discipline is indulgence. Discipline is get up in the morning when you're absolutely exhausted, when you're mentally exhausted. You have to get up. You have to go to work and you have to focus.
True.
Or you indulge, you lay in, you give up, you blame something else. Oh, it's not my fault. It's the food. I feel sick, or something's wrong. You blame it and you indulge yourself with that blame. And then the spiritual intelligence. Spiritual intelligence is your moral compass. It's your compass, and it guides all the other three. And the highest manifestation is to leave a legacy in the job that you did. I always measured that if I was running a ship, if I could leave the ship and nothing would happen, everything would function well, I did my job.
True.
Because I was a leader and I had everybody doing, and I wasn't necessarily, and that was my time to go.
True.
And the opposite of leaving a legacy is ego. To be concentrated on your own ego.
True.
Rather than,
Legacy.
wanting to leave a legacy to others, because that will fill you with much greater joy, in life. So those are the principles of quantum leadership, and that's what I believe in, and I observed great leaders that I was around and in life, and I extracted that, and then I brought it to the four intelligences of life.
Wow.
Because everything is, you can break down to the four intelligences of life. Every single thing. You can mention any one word, and I can make a quadrant and tell you where it is.
True.
And when it helps you get that big picture, as a leader, you often, what is leadership? You can boil it down to that.
Yeah, true.
And then you can fill out the quadrant with all the lists, and that's where the training comes in. And then you know immediately where everything fits.
There you are, yeah.
And then it helps you become a great leader.
Very interesting. Okay, Holmes, there's one last thing I need from you.
Yes.
Money is water and water is money. So I've heard a lot about this quote from you. Why don't you tell our audience? Because this is so fascinating and so thoughtful of you that you composed this. So please.
Well, this is my little ode, and I have been in shipping now for 20 years in the cruise industry, but obviously in shipbuilding before. And I was fascinated by all the terms. But big parts of my life, like Venezuela, and when I lived in Brazil, I saw 3,000% inflation, money. And I started to look at the correlation between water and money. And that's what took me to what's called the law of water. It was based on Admiralty maritime law. And if you fly over planet Earth, you see two things, land and sea. The land is divided by jurisdiction and has its own law, but it's based on the law of water. And you have the sea, which is 2/3 of the land, of the earth. And it's interesting that our body is 2/3 water and 1/3 bone. So there's a symbiotic relationship between us and the water. And so I looked into it more, and then I understood that you have terms like cash flow. So what is cash flow? How does the cash flow? No, it's water. Because money is water and water is money. And if I gave you $100,000, where would you put the money?
Bank.
In a bank. You'd have to put it in a bank before you figure out where to spend it. Where did the word bank come from? Riverbank. Because the two banks of the river control the flow of the water. And the two banks, through transactions, control the flow of the money. Because money is water and water is money. So what do you call a flow of water?
Current.
What is yes, it's a current. Yeah. And if you think about it, a current is the current moment. So if you walk across a river, where the water hits you, that's the current moment that you're in. And the current is the energy that pushes the water. And the current, that's why you have a current account, because that's the energy of the money pushing through your account.
True.
And it was Heraclitus that said that no man can ever cross the same river twice, for he is not the same man, and it is not the same river.
Wow.
And not the same water. Yeah. And that's why you're on the current moment, because that current moment is unique to that moment.
True.
So look at this. The two banks of the river control the flow of the current to the sea. Currency. And the currency is the water of the planet, which is 2/3 of the planet and dominates the earth. And it has its own jurisdiction, the law of water. Now, what's important to understand is that you're a pilot and you see ships, why is a ship a she? We always hear that,
Yeah.
There she sails, we say, Our Lady. And we hear these cruise lines, Princess Cruises, Oriana, and in Virgin Voyages, they have the Scarlet Lady, Queen Elizabeth, Queen Mary. Yeah. They're always female, and we have, when we do a new voyage, it's called a maiden voyage.
Yes.
And when the ship comes into the port, the port agent serves it, and we call, do you know what we call those services? Husbandry services. Because we're the husband to the ship. So the ship is a she, and that's part of the law of water, and it's connected to the money as well. So you have to bear with me to understand this. So a ship is a vessel floating on water.
Right.
So who drives the ship?
Captain.
The captain. So the captain, where did the word captain come from? Captain, it comes from the word kapitolio, which is a Greek word, which means capital. Because if you think about it, the captain's in charge of the capital of the ship, which is the asset, the cargo, and the people.
True.
Because he's in charge of the safety of lives.
True.
And when you've got passengers on a ship, people is money.
Yeah.
So the captain steers the ship towards the port. The port is portal. Porta comes from the Latin word, and it means entry point. And that's why a portal is an entry point. So as the ship goes towards the port, the ship is greeted by you, the pilot, because it has to go in through the deep water canal so it doesn't ground. It doesn't go near because sometimes entering ports, the depth of the water varies.
Yes.
So it's the pilot that guides the ship through the safe deep water canal or channel. And then the ship gets into the harbour, it manoeuvres and it docks into a berth.
Right.
And the ship berths. And then the people of the ship, the crew and the passengers, they manifest on the land.
Yeah.
Passenger manifest, crew manifest. And then all the activities that happen from the crew and the cargo and the passengers, they all disperse on the land. That's why the port agent makes a disbursement account. He accounts for all the disbursements that happen. And all those disbursements on the land create money for all they have lots of revenue streams.
Streams,
we call them. Now, what's that got to do with a woman? Well, a female, is a vessel for another human being inside her. And that baby lives inside the mother in water. You can't make it up. And she has a big stomach with water.
Yeah.
And when the water breaks, the midwife helps the baby come out. The midwife is you, the pilot.
Correct.
And guides the baby out through the birth canal. It's literally called the birth canal.
Yeah.
And then the baby manifests on the land. And what do we give the baby? A certificate of manifest, which is called a birth certificate. Because the baby birthed on the land.
Yeah.
And when a ship goes to birth, it's the same thing. And it goes from one dimension to the other dimension, from water to land.
True.
And the baby goes from water to land. So you give the baby a birth certificate. And with a birth certificate, what do you get? A passport. Because you pass by the port. And with a passport, what do you get? Citizenship.
Ship.
Because you're on the ship of citizens.
Yeah.
And that birth certificate and that whole citizenship is tradable on the stock exchange for the government. And that is an asset to the government. That is a value. Because the people are the assets for each of the countries. That's why India has a great asset, right?
Yeah.
1.3 billion people. So money is water and water is money. And that's the law of water.
Wow. Holmes, it's like one of the most spiritual podcasts I've ever had. Philosophical, spiritual, and you have so much of experience of life, cruise shipping, entrepreneurship, casinos, travel. Thank you so much, Holmes, to be here today. I know it's been a little longer than what we expected, but
no problem.
There's so much learning we got today. So guys, there's so much learning in this podcast. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this one. And Mr. Holmes is there on LinkedIn. With his permission, I will put his LinkedIn profile link in the description. So if you have any questions or if you have any suggestions for him, please feel free to connect. Thank you so much, Mr. Holmes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Really appreciate. Really
no
appreciate
pleasure.
it.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. See you port to port. Thank you.